Good evening. I'd like to call the regular Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, January 19th, 2026 to order at 6 p.m. My name is Councillor Garnett. I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. Joining me in the council chambers are my colleagues. To my far left, Councillor Novak, Councillor O'Keefe. To my far right, Councillor Duck, Councillor Duncan, and Mayor McNeil-Smith. And joining us online from some fantastic location, I'm assuming, is Councillor Chad Rintoul. And I'd also like to welcome staff that are in attendance in the meeting tonight. Good evening to those who will be watching the live stream with us and those who will choose to watch the meeting at a later date when it's on the website. And thank you to the lone member from the public who's chosen to join us tonight for being in attendance and sharing your evening with us. I'd like to acknowledge that we're holding this meeting in the territory of the Wasanich Nations, and that is the Sayout, the Sartlip, the Sakum, the Pakwachin, and the Malahat Nations. And we'd like to express gratitude and appreciation for their stewardship of these lands and waters for millennia. And may we emulate that same stewardship in this amazing place we are fortunate to call our home. Before moving to the next item, I just want to take a moment during what has been an incredibly difficult year and time lately, just to recognize and offer my appreciation and gratitude for my fellow members of council for conducting themselves in this chamber with civility, decorum, and respect in all our meetings. And I think more now than ever, this is needed. So appreciation. Thank you. Next up on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Moved by Councillor Duck, seconded by Councillor Novak. Are there any late items anybody would like to add? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries unanimously. Next, we'll have approval of the minutes. Moved by Councillor Duck, seconded by Councillor Novak. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries unanimously. So next up on the agenda is a public participation period, and in regular committee of the whole meetings, comments are reserved for items on the agenda. And so if you do want to come forward, you just push the button on the bottom of the microphone stand and the red light will come on by the microphone, and then you can state your name and address where you live and reside in the municipality. And I'm getting a shaking of no from our only participant in the public. So I'll go through the periods anyways. For a first time, I'll ask if anybody would like to address council. Second time, third time, and so I'll close public participation at 6:02. So that was quick. So we'll go right, there's no presentations, no development applications. We'll go right to number 8, staff reports. There are 3 staff reports tonight, and so we'll move them all individually, and staff can provide their comments. At that point, under each one, I'll allow our colleagues can ask their questions and provide comments at that time. And so my plan at this time, after looking through and speaking with the CAO prior to the meeting, at that point, once we've done all 3, we can go back to 8A with the strategic plan and see if there's any alterations or additions or anything at that point that anybody would like to bring forward. So with that, I'll move in number 8A, strategic plan 2022 to 26. This is providing 2025 year-end update on priorities and actions, and I'll turn it over to our CAO, Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to perhaps reiterate a little bit of what our Chair just shared, but I also wanted to start by identifying that we're holding this strategic planning session in a public meeting, and in large part because we're at that point in the council's term where we're primarily focused on how and when we will try to achieve completion on the items in council's strategic plan. And at this point in council's term, we don't anticipate that substantive new items would be added to the plan. And as such, therefore, we don't really need to be in a closed setting where we may be discussing confidential and sensitive information if we were considering adding new items. I did want to speak very clearly about this because I think it's important for council and the public to know that if and when we have a new council, we would likely have that first strategic planning session in a closed meeting, because it is highly likely that we will be discussing sensitive confidential information during that session. It's the creation of the strategic plan that requires that ability to speak candidly and confidentially about sensitive materials. However, tonight we're at a place where we can speak more openly about the strategic plan and in large part because we don't, at least we don't anticipate any substantive new items coming onto the plan. As the chair identified, we'll walk through the strategic plan first and provide a review of where we're at with each of the items, and then we'll move to provide a review of the council action items in a similar fashion. Following that, we'll review the 2 items that were referred by council to this meeting. And then finally, we'll circle back to the strategic plan itself to see if there's any amendments that the committee would like to make to itself for a future council meeting for consideration, approval, and ultimately adoption of this year's strategic plan, which will be the final version for this council's term. And as we go through each section, please feel free to ask questions as we go along. And I'll leave it there before we move into the actual strategic plan to see if there's any questions about process or anything of that matter. Seeing none. So as in your document, on your agenda, you'll have the strategic plan itself and then the 2025 year-end update. It's that 2025 year-end update that I will be referencing as we walk through the plan. So we start off with the strategic goal number 1, community planning and housing. And as you'll note, the first of 3 actions have been completed. The first being updating the zoning bylaw to align with the 20-year housing supply and the housing needs report. And that was completed most recently in Q4 of 2025. Number 2 was the update of the official community plan to align with the 20-year housing supply and the housing needs report. And that too was completed in Q4 of 2025.
Excuse me, Mr. Roberts.
Chair, if I
think
could
the mayor
have a
has
point of
one.
privilege, please.
Yep.
Is it possible to post this on the screen, just in the event that there are members of the public?
I'd have to join the meeting. Yeah, we can do that. Just give me a moment here.
Thank you.
I can find it here. I think that's about as large as I can make it without being in an actual PowerPoint or separate PDF. So again, just a reminder, if any member of council does have a question as we go, please don't hesitate to raise it. And so moving on to item 3, which is implement housing policies and initiatives with a focus on non-market housing. This item is still underway. Right now it shows a completion date of 2026 Q4 and it being in progress. And there may be some items that are able to come forward during this council term before completion of this term in October, but it's not it's a little too soon to say it right at this moment. So.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Thanks. Through you to staff. Yeah, so that was one of the ones that I kind of highlighted as, a priority for me. What I recall is that this came up as a strategic priority after we had put together, staff had put together a housing action plan. We tried to get some federal funding for that. It didn't happen. So we were taking elements of that housing action plan and implementing those. My recollection at the time is that staff said that 60% of those things were done already, and that was a year ago. And I guess I'm just wondering, what would be required if we wanted to kind of move that up, say to the end of Q2 or something. And I guess, things that are on my mind are, we've gone through this, a lot of time and effort to set up emergency cold weather shelters. And I know that's taken up staff's time. But throughout that process, what I continued to hear from people was that, okay, that's good that you're doing that, but what we really need is places for these people to live full-time. And I know that we also had our housing needs report, and we're meeting the number that we need, but there's very little on the lower end of that housing spectrum. It's also something I hear from the business community. Recently, business owners telling me that for 2 months they had homeless person allowing them to camp out in the lobby of their business because they had nowhere to go. Other cafes around town who are allowing those people to kind of camp out and hang out in their cafes. So those sorts of things are weighing heavily on me in terms of what we can do for housing at the lower end. And I guess the other thing for me is that we all know how difficult it is right now for developers to make a housing project financially viable. And so what's in my mind is I know there's limited things that we can do as a municipality. We don't have land and other things, but having a set of policies, priorities, incentives that we can at least put out to the development community to kind of entice them. So that's kind of what's on my mind, and whether there's a way to advance this, I guess, is my question.
Right, thank you, Councillor. I'll respond first, but I'll also turn to our Director of Planning for a response too. But I think it'd be very difficult to bring back initiatives by Q2 of this year, given our capacity. I mean, we're a fairly small team, as you know, and in particular because Council has made emergency warming center and shelter a priority that actually isn't in the strategic priorities document. When we mapped out the timeline required to be able to achieve that outcome by September of this year, we do need to focus on bringing that forward as soon as possible. So if we want to have the necessary zoning tools and amendments in place to enable a emergency warming shelter to occur in the town by September, then we need to be bringing that back to council as soon as possible. And so that's the current priority. And council can always dictate to staff what the higher level priorities are, and if council would rather shift our focus from that emergency shelter rezoning initiative to focus on non-market housing, then we can do that. But we don't really have a lot of staff to be able to task with competing multiple priorities at the same time. So I'll turn to the Director of Planning to see if he has additional context.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I would add that this initiative is underway. If the committee members recall, in the fall, a staff report came forward discussing those remaining items from the Housing Action Plan, the ones that, some of which have been completed. And what came out of that report was moving forward with what was called an affordable housing partnership program. And so that was a suite of actions that we would undertake to, I think, incentivize hopefully a below market housing project. Essentially making the playing field for a non-market housing provider a little more attractive to come to Sydney and do their thing. That work is underway. The first step of that work is we are required by the province to do a financial assessment of our bonus density provisions in the zoning bylaw, as well as the cost of an inclusionary housing, inclusionary zoning requirement, which is also a to-do item from the OCP's affordable housing section. So we're just about to release an RFP on that work, and that's sort of one of the first steps to get this partnership program going. Once that work is done, then we would look at those the suite of things that we could do. One of which would be things like DCC waivers, or potentially bonus density amenity fee waivers to really make the landscape attractive for a non-market housing provider. So yeah, that stuff will all take time to put together, and part of that will be done by the end of Q2 2026, but it is definitely going to take a little bit longer than that. The other thing I'd add too is that we cannot initiate that non-market housing project. It takes a non-market housing provider to come to this town with funding. We could certainly contribute to that funding if the interest was there, but it does take that outside entity to come here, identify a site, pull the funding together, and pull a project off, which is not an easy thing to do in any municipality, let alone one with extremely high land prices. So there's a lot of challenges, but yeah, it is moving forward.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for that. Yeah, I certainly recognize the challenge of having to have a nonprofit organization come forward, and what I've heard from them is they're more likely to consider municipalities that have that sort of menu of options available. So, as soon as we can get that, that would be great. And I guess, the emergency shelter, I don't see us changing our mind on that. That's something that's got to be done. I guess in my mind, if there was other things like the sea level rise, or the other things like that maybe were flood level construction levels. I don't know all the different things that staff are working on, but just kind of putting it out there that I at least would be receptive to letting some other things kind of slide if there was a way that we could sort of bring that up a bit. So just some input on that. Thanks.
Okay, carrying on. Item number 4 under goal number 1 is explore the creation of the tenant protection bylaw. And that is, right now it has a completion date identified as Q4 2025, and that needs to be updated. It's currently in progress, and it's expected to be brought forward near the end of this quarter in 2026, or early in Q2 2026. So we would, if council agreed with that, we would make a recommendation to update the completion date as identified.
Councillor Duck?
Yeah, just if I could get, because right now it just says update to Q1. Is it going to be Q1 or is it going to be Q2? Because I just, this was an issue that came up with a number of rental properties, and certainly there's some defined interest in the population that rents in this community to have that in place. Can we get a more concrete?
Yeah, through the chair to councillor, I don't know that there were a number of rental properties. I think there was the one rental property that was, I believe, handled fairly well, regardless of having a bylaw in place. We're not currently aware of any projects that are imminent or causing a concern for this to be fast-tracked. That said, you know, I do believe, as it says in the report, we're targeting the end of Q1, but I know Q1 is ending right around the corner, it feels like. So that's why I prefaced it with it's possible that it could move into Q2, so.
Thank you.
We could keep it at the, end of Q1 and aim for that.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, moving on to goal number 2, environmental stewardship. Goal number 1, priority 1, is undertaking planning for adaptation to sea level rise. We've identified the status as underway because while staff and our consultants did report out to council in Q4 of 2025, we do have further communications planned to communicate with the public about this work. It'll be part of our town talk articles going out in later in Q1, and possible information sessions depending on council's decisions regarding next steps. And just for clarity too, while this project does live within the planning department, it's a different type of planner that is focused on this work than the planning around the housing initiative. This work is being undertaken primarily by our climate action coordinator position, not the planning and the planning technicians. And so, and this work, we did make a commitment to council at an earlier meeting to discuss this at this meeting about how it would be prioritized. So it's part of the third sort of step in this meeting with those 2 council recommendations to this meeting. So I would recommend that we defer further discussion until that time.
Mayor Miguel-Smith?
Thank you, Chair, and through you to staff. But just want to clarify, and happy to leave the other part to 8C, but in the work to come up with a, I'm not sure if strategy is the correct term, in the staff report and presentation that we had, that would be coming back, my recollection was 2027. Appreciating that that council has to determine the priority with regards to the specific FCL, which we're going to be talking about under 8C, but under the main body of work that's been completed in coming up with a strategy. Was it late 2026 or 2027 that was intended to
That's correct. I don't foresee being able to develop a full strategy before 2027.
was an adaptation and mitigation
Yeah.
strategy.
That's right.
So one of the things we can discuss when we come back to this is the timing of that, if it's into the next term. So I'll just leave my comment there, my comment there.
Okay, moving on to goal number 3, community infrastructure. Priority number 1 is facilities asset management. 1A is develop a concept plan and undertake community engagement process for a new town hall. This part, 1A, is underway, and staff are working to develop a community engagement process, which is targeted to begin this spring. Right now we're aiming for the end of March, perhaps launching a little bit sooner with a community survey and non-binding survey, of course, and and that we would then be following up with some public meetings with, try to seek community input on this initiative as this project starts to gain some traction. And then 1B is conduct preliminary assessment of public works and parks facilities, and that work is also underway, and staff are actually working with a professional to build out a initial conceptual idea which would be the basis for a grant funding application where we can secure funding for the planning element of that project and the feasibility assessment for that project. Unfortunately, there is no funding available for the capital side to that project. And I should back up for a moment and just to say that there's absolutely no funding available for the town hall projects. It's never been a eligible project category. And I don't think it will become one anytime soon either. However, for the public works yard, there is a significant push being made at the province and the federal government level to make public works yards eligible for grant funding. I'm not sure that any changes will be made in time for this project, but it's something that we're a fairly strong advocate for. So we hope to bring that back later this year as well for an update to council. Item number 2 is review options for the provision of library services. This had a completion date targeted of Q2 2026. Staff recommend that this initiative be withdrawn from the plan as there's been little to no concerns raised from the community. And ultimately, as you know, this would need to be a shared initiative with the District of North Saanich. And any substantive changes would require a referendum. And at this time, staff believe that the previous concerns are no longer there, and as such, believe that it would be reasonable to pull it from the plan.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. So as we go through and we come across things like that you're recommending we pull out, do we need to make a motion for that, like now or at next council, or what kind of process would we?
Oh, thank you, Councillor. I think if we're sort of taking notes as we go along, once we've gone through all 3 items on the agenda, we'll circle back to the strategic plan itself to identify, okay, well, what if anything needs to change? I know this is one that I would circle back to, and I would seek the committee to make a recommendation to council for such changes to then be considered for approval and adoption.
Okay, thank you.
And so then we move to priority number 3, which is advance options for increased multimodal connectivity across Highway 17. It says here completion Q2 2026. And through ongoing dialogue that staff have continued to have with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, it's become clear that a true multimodal connection across the highway, something along the lines of a pedestrian overpass, is a low priority for the ministry. However, staff would recommend keeping it as a strategic initiative simply for the ability to demonstrate to the ministry in future years that this remains a priority for council for X number of years. The ministry has identified that they will be advancing pedestrian crossing improvements, but that's mostly to the pedestrian islands on the highway. And so we likely will see those improvements happen in the very near future. We are working with them collaboratively to broader improvements to that intersection, including addition of a second left turn lane if you're traveling eastbound from on Beacon on the west side of the highway. So if you can follow the directions there, if you were traveling perhaps from where the new hotel is being built towards the downtown of Sydney, there'll be an additional left turn lane there, so that'll reduce some of the congestion that occurs. And we would like to coordinate that work with highways so that we're doing it in a coordinated fashion, because they will be doing upgrades to 2 of the pedestrian islands at that crossing. However, I don't think it really does achieve the full multimodal elements that we're after.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Through you to staff. So I know staff have had meetings at UBCM. We talked to the minister's staff, and I'm just wondering, what have we ever, and maybe it's not part of the process, having a formal letter to the minister to say, this is what we want, this is growth related, here's all our rationale spelled out in a letter. Like, is that something we've done or we would do in order to get a formal response back, or is it just a more informal kind of way that we go at these things?
I believe that has been done in the past, and
Okay.
we have effectively had a formal response from the ministry, also at a staff level too. But it doesn't hurt to make those goals or desires known, and to write a letter to the minister. And I think at this stage in a council term, the minister will recognize that there is little that they may do with this current council, but it never hurts to get it on their radar, keep it on their radar, and so I think a letter from the mayor to the minister is not a bad thing.
Okay. And would you see us then doing that? Is that something we might add to the strategic plan then, as in terms of an action item?
I don't think we
Or-
would add a letter from the mayor.
Well, no,
But
I-
I can take that away as an action item to follow up with if council
oh.
agrees.
okay.
Yeah, but we can circle
Yeah,
back
okay,
on
fine.
that.
And then, yeah, thanks. So my other question related to this is, so knowing that this is something that we've wanted for a long time, I think there's a real good pitch to be made that it is growth related. And I can't recall, maybe staff can remind me, have we costed out this recently? I know we may have in the past, like when we were considering that other commercial development years ago. But I don't know if we've done a recent rough analysis in terms of what the cost for that would be, and if it's growth related, whether that's one of the projects that we're including in our list of DCC projects.
We don't have a recent cost analysis. I do know it would be very expensive, and I don't think it would be it's not included in the DCC program, and I don't believe that it would be it would be extremely expensive. I don't know that. I mean, any contribution from a DCC would be helpful, but I don't think it would really get us to where we need to be. So.
Okay, I mean, I have no concept of whether, 5 million, 10 million, 20 million, no idea. And I guess what I'm thinking about is there any value in having a rough cost of it? So that if the provincial government isn't looking to do this, at least for 10 or more years, and if there's money that comes available through federal grants, or if there's an opportunity to get some from DCCs, are those things worth considering?
We do have previous cost estimates, we don't have recent ones. And we are talking in the 10 million plus range.
Okay,
And so we know that. But, you know, and I do think if there was a funding program that became available where this seemed like it would be a great project to submit, it wouldn't be that difficult to get an updated cost estimate
Oh,
in
okay.
time for that program.
okay,
I would hesitate to do that work at this time without
yeah,
there being any viable
sure.
option to benefit from.
Yeah, good, that makes sense. Okay, good, that's all, thanks.
Mayor Mickelson?
Thank you, Chair. Questions for you to staff. If a pedestrian overpass was not a project considered during the DCC review, does that mean that if DCCs are implemented at some future time, we could or couldn't use DCCs for such a project?
That's correct. You can amend your DCC program at any time, and we anticipate updating our DCC program on a fairly frequent basis, if not at least at a minimum of every 5 years. And so if we felt this was a project that was a really good fit for DCC recovery, we could include that.
Thank you.
If there isn't anybody else, I have a couple questions. Just with regards to the 2 left turn lanes coming from the east or from the west, would that incorporate also a left turn signal? Because I'm not sure the advantage of without it, having driven that many, many times.
Right, that's a good question, and I don't know if we're at that level of detail yet.
Okay.
I could turn to our director of engineer to see if he has any further. No, I don't think we're at that detail yet. Yeah. The director said that almost certainly it would have an advanced left
Okay.
when you've got a double
Okay.
wide turn lane, but we're not quite at that stage yet.
So my other question is with regards, okay, there were conversations held with the Ministry of I guess we're saying Modi in here, but I guess it's MOT now. Ministry of
right.
Transportation and
Yes.
Transit. Were there simultaneous conversations had? I'm wondering if a different approach might not be to go through the Minister of Housing. We're meeting your targets, we're creating all this extra residences on one side of the highway, and we don't have a safe way for them to get across, and maybe we can get them to pester the other ministry to maybe advance something, put the pressure on them, as opposed to us having to do it.
It's a really good point. It always stands to benefit to have more MLAs and more cabinet ministers aware of the priorities, because ultimately when it comes down to infrastructure funding decisions, it's not just one minister, it's usually a committee. And I always recommend also letting the Minister of Finance to be aware of the priorities too, because they are usually involved in some form or capacity.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on to priority number 4, update the development cost charge bylaw and consider implementing an amenity cost charge bylaw to align with the new provincial legislation. And so the target was Q4 2025. The bylaw was introduced in Q1 2026. And the ACC, the amenity cost charge bylaw, will follow later in this quarter here. I should amend this because the bylaw wasn't actually introduced in Q1. That was the goal. We've been waiting on our consultants to turn around some questions and some detailed elements that we need confirmed before we bring it back to council for consideration. We also have had a discussion with the ministry staff that will review the bylaw to help ensure that it's constructed in the way that they want to see it. And so we feel pretty confident that when it does come back, and we're hoping that it will be coming back in the coming weeks, that it will easily meet the test of the inspector of municipalities. We're essentially then waiting for the inspector's office to return the bylaw, hopefully approved. We don't know how long that'll take. It's anywhere from 2 to 4 months. And so hopefully we'll have the bylaw approved by Q3 of this year. So moving on to goal 4, community engagement. Priority 1 is complete a citizen satisfaction survey. This was completed in Q2 of 2025, and the results were presented to council in Q3.
Councillor Duck?
Yes, if I can, through to staff. I guess I'm disappointed that we didn't address community engagement better. We only had one strategic priority here, but the definition is to strive to engage the public in direct decision-making processes. And I think we have to find, in future, better ways to evaluate our communication and engagement, because we were, I think, failures in engaging and getting the decision in the decision process around things like the emergency cold weather shelter, bar bank, and now we have town hall coming up. And so I'd like to see a mechanism somewhere there where we're evaluating the engagement, because we have it as actions within other things, but I don't know if we're stepping back and saying, were we successful in engaging them? And I think we need to look at that. If we're looking at one of our goals being community engagement, how we look at our community engagement, not just how we do a survey, and that survey was a global survey, yet it doesn't address areas that we had specific challenges with, and I don't know how we do that.
Well, I'd say that's up to council to identify the strategic priorities and the action items within it. And so if council felt or feels like that there needs to be more, then that's council's prerogative. And, you know, as a reminder, every and all projects that come forward to council all the staff reports now have a community communications section in it, where we do identify what that communication strategy and engagement strategy will be. And so for each individual project, there's the opportunity for council to weigh in and provide their thoughts or direction as to what they wish they would like to see. I think the idea of a lot of communities might have what's called a community engagement strategy, and that's essentially a plan to engage and how you engage on the various types of projects that you might undertake as a community. And we essentially have that kind of a strategy, and it shows up in every staff report that comes to council as to here's how we plan to engage. But you know, I would say going forward, if council wanted to have that type of a plan in place, that's something that staff could develop. I would recommend that be pushed to the future council's consideration, given the amount of community engagement that we will be undertaking in this year alone for the initiatives like you have identified, Councillor. And I do also want to be really clear about this too, in that just because the community didn't like something that we did doesn't mean that we failed. And if we hear more often than not, when people don't like something that they're being told about, they will say that there's been inadequate engagement, regardless of the amount of engagement that has actually occurred. And so I've heard time and time again that there's been a lack of transparency, not just here with the town of Sydney, with any government that I've worked with, a lack of transparency and a lack of engagement. And more often than not, it's not that there's been a lack, it's more that those that are raising that concern perhaps engaged late. and they don't necessarily like what they're being, or what they're hearing. And so, but I would say it's actually a success, like if and when we hear from the community, and if it's a very loud opposition, and then council's responsive and reactive to that, then I'd say that then council and staff did engage well and then responded appropriately. So I just want to make sure that we're not taking the criticism in the wrong way, because I think that I've seen this council be very responsive to the concerns being raised from community, positive or negative.
Thank you. No, your point well taken, and it's more about just stepping back and looking at those engagements and seeing if we're doing, it's not about the outcomes, and I agree with you that it is good to get a response, and sometimes even a negative response is a good thing. So yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. Just, weighing in on that same issue. I think it's worthwhile, like Councillor Duck says, to kind of look at some of the major communication engagement events we've had, and whether there were lessons learned to be learned. And certainly I absolutely agree that there's, once people find out about something they don't like, they're going to come forward. What I find is I'd like us to look at a bit more about the type, not necessarily the amount of engagement, because I think we do a lot of it. We do pop-up things and surveys and all kinds of things, but sometimes the timing and what it is we're doing is critical. And if we don't do it at the right time, if we've made our decision on a certain thing, and then we go and inform people that this is what we're doing, and then we get hundreds of emails in, then there's a little bit of a problem with those sorts of things. But I think it's a good idea to maybe give some thought for council, give some thought for that in the next term, as you say. So thank you for that.
And I would agree that we do have to look at how our communications engagement went and make course adjustments as necessary. I believe that staff at the town of Sydney have a really strong culture of continuous improvement, and I think that all staff look at the work that they do and look for opportunities of how to do it better next time. And so I couldn't agree with you more that needs to be embedded in our communication strategies too.
Excuse me, Mr. Edwards, just going to take a second. Just in case your systems aren't working, I'm just going to check in with Councillor Rintoul. Is there anything you wanted to add at this point in time?
No, thank you. The presentation can be seen very clearly. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Okay, moving on to goal number 5, organizational excellence. Priority number 1 is to 1A, establish a council remuneration policy, which was completed in Q2 of 2025. And 1B was to complete the first review of council remuneration by Q4 of 2025. And unfortunately, staff were not able to complete that review in that time frame, and we do anticipate bringing it back in early in early February, right before the budget process begins. And I do apologize. I know this was an important element for council to have brought back in Q4, and but we do hope that it will be before you in a couple of weeks.
Councillor Duck?
Yes, if I can answer just staff, yes, I'm disappointed in this one because it creates a timing conflict now, and this is moving into an election year. This was supposed to be resolved before it, and in fact, UBCM directs us to do this at the latest in the third year of a term, and we're now moving into the 4th year of a term. So it's creating conflict, both with the budget, because now it becomes a budget item, but also it becomes potentially an election item as well, which was the reason to try and avoid that. So yeah, unfortunate. Thank you.
That's right, Councillor, and I do acknowledge that and apologize for it. I do want to be clear that UBCM has very little authority to compel you to do anything, and that they do not require you to do this whatsoever. They do have a best practice guide and they recommend it, but you're not required to by UBCM.
Agreed, but that's the reason they have best practices. The intent is to make it the best practice.
That's right.
Thank you, Chair.
If there's no other questions on this item, we'll move to 8B, status of outstanding council action items, December 2025. Mr. Edwards?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'll ask Councillor Rintoul if this is size is sufficient for viewing on screen.
Yeah, no, it looks good. Thank you, Mr. Edwards.
Okay. So we'll run through these. I don't think I'll read them fully because that would take quite a bit of time. And so perhaps the mayor had an idea, which I now appreciate even more, is that if each one of these were numbered, we could perhaps move through them quicker. And so what I propose is I will identify which one that we're on, and or even potentially if we ask if there are any questions for the first page items, and pause there, and then we can move to the next page. So I would ask council if there are any questions for any of the items on the first page.
Mayor Meekman-Smith.
Thank you, and I would support a numbering, but the reference is the date that's at the very beginning, and so I'd like to go with the very first one, April 12th, 21, the Beacon West traffic study. And it says that staff bring forward projects addressing other study recommendations through the annual budget process. So of course the main initiative was the traffic circle and multimodal improvements there. But while I didn't go back to that study, I do recollect that one of the initiatives the study recommended, I think they used the term midterm. It was near term, midterm, long term, was an intersection at the corner of McDonald Park Road and Mills. Could staff possibly speak tonight, if not tonight, perhaps for when this comes to council next week? What other study recommendations might be considered in the near future, in the future, in the next year or two? Appreciating those answers may not be available tonight, but
That's right. Thank you, Mayor. I think we're not able to respond appropriately this evening, so we'd like to bring that back when this comes back to council.
thank you. A second question I have is, when this comes, the next time this report comes forward, is it possible, I mean, in some of this, for example, the second one, 22nd November 2021, the downtown streetscape and urban design, it says there is a target completion date for this project in Q4 2026. Are staff endeavoring, when they would do, at the times we review this, to try to attach timelines to it? Because there's some of them that says, it will come forward at the appropriate time. I'm just looking at one of the lines, and so that's no time frame at all, if you will, and it might be helpful for council. And I'm thinking about some of the ones that do go back to 2021, 22, and so on. What possible time frames are. So again, I'm not expecting that staff would be able to do this for next week's council meeting, but just some input for the future.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mayor. I think it's a reasonable request, and staff do try to identify timeframes for achieving these.
So
At risk of being repetitive, staff are often trying to address competing priorities, and through operational requirements and council strategic plan initiatives, And then these are additional initiatives from council that weren't necessarily part of a strategic plan. So I do think that going forward, we can try to identify a target completion for those. And I think I can think of a way that we can better address these outstanding items and try to ensure that we don't fall behind on them.
Thank you, and if I could have a subsequent, and so staying on the first page, the bottom one, May 24th, 2022, the CRD Regional Public EV Charging Network grant application and that the town is in a partnership with, and we did, two questions. One is, was the initiative for the dozen or so charging stations at Winspear part of this initiative? It wasn't. Okay, thank you. Can staff give some indication of a timeline given the process that's described within the report?
Thank you. Through the mayor to, or sorry, through the chair to the mayor. We understand that the funds have been secured and the CRD is working on an agreement with the municipal partners that would be part of that program. We have not yet seen a draft of that agreement come forward. So we're essentially waiting for the CRD to move this project forward, and we don't have any further update apart from that, essentially.
Okay, well, I know the CRD representative, so, so a question is, there's 13 municipalities in 3 electoral areas. So do we see it where the CRD is now? Is it really has to determine what the balance will be across the different jurisdictions, given that it would be a plan between the CRD and Sydney?
My understanding is that the town put forward the sites that it would like to see transferred to the program, and there was some sort of acknowledgement that yes, that would be fine. An appropriate number of charging stations within Sydney, but I don't know how overall it's working across the region in terms of, is it population based or something like that.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. Starting on the first page, just going back again to the second one, the 22nd of November 2021 on the downtown streetscape and urban design standards. So that's one of those ones that, was slated for completion in 22, then we kicked it to 23 and 24 and 25, now it's 26. And so what I'm wondering is, although like the formal amendments and changes haven't been made in all the places they need, are we still following that anyways?
Through the chair to Councillor O'Keefe, yes, staff are looking to that for guidance when we are negotiating, talking to developers about off-site design improvements. You can see the impact that the downtown streetscape plan has made in terms of new sidewalks in the downtown in front of the new mixed-use buildings that have come up on 3rd Street and 4th Street, at the corner of 4th and Beacon. So the frontage is there with the wider sidewalks and the new style that's been inspired by the downtown streetscape plan. So we are working on a review of the subdivision bylaw. It is a big project. The end of 2026 may be an ambitious timeline given everything else that we have on the go, but it's a project that multiple departments are working on together. So, thank you.
And I guess the other thing is, I don't remember enough about the design standards. And I'm just wondering if by the time we get to this, 5 years have passed, do we still think that what we have in there is relevant, or is, depending on what's going on with other like housing legislation or other things that we see coming down the pike, should we instead be looking to review them, or are we still comfortable with how they are even 5 years later?
Thank you through the chair to Councillor O'Keefe. Having been involved in that program in 2018, the development of the streetscape standards, it was a different council, but some who may have watched those council meetings recall that there was, I think, maybe some disagreement between the consultant who worked on that project and staff about what ended up in the document. And so everything that's in the document is not going wholesale into subdivision and development bylaw number 1390. What the plan is to take the the good stuff, I guess, for lack of a better term. Things like the sidewalk widths and the type of paving and things like that, that we are already implementing essentially, but formalize that in the bylaw. And so to an extent, some of the things that are in that streetscape standards document were outdated the moment it was essentially adopted because of the lack of sort of dots on the i's and crosses to the t's at the time. But the intent is, yes, to bring some of that stuff, the good stuff, into the subdivision development bylaw when that bylaw gets updated. I think the thing with that bylaw is that it's functioning fairly well right now, and so it's not one of those absolutely critical things that needs to be done right away.
Okay,
But over time, it is worthwhile to do.
okay. So it sounds like we're not really missing out on much by, that we haven't done it, so that, yeah, that's fine. Oh, the other one on that page was the one about, from 24th of January 2022, and the, increasing the accessible parking spaces near the band shell. And I sent a picture to staff late this afternoon, sorry for the late question. And so this was something that had come up at one of the initial SPAC meetings. And they had also, just because Beacon Park is obviously a place where we have a lot of public events, and so what we hear from persons who have mobility challenges is that they just can't get parking. There's only one tiny spot there. And so sometimes they end up driving there and they just drive home because there's just not spaces for them. And so one of the members had identified there was a spot beside the accessible spot. It was on the end, and it was adjacent to kind of an open area space. And she had said, hey, you know, if you could add another spot there and then use that space for a side opening van. So I'm just wondering if there's, you know, I know there's a lot of other things going on with accessible parking, but if that is something that might be a quick fix, I don't know, for this summer.
Through the chair to Councillor O'Keefe. So yes, I actually would like to thank you for drawing attention to this item. When I was making updates to my applicable items in this document, this one, I either didn't read it accurately, or so I read this item as talking about across downtown, and that's sort of what the update speaks to. So I didn't realize this was speaking specifically to near the band shell. So I want to thank you for drawing attention to it and for the photo. And if I were rewriting the update right now, then I would say absolutely we can look into that specific spot and would take this as council direction to increase accessible parking near the band shell. So I'm happy to commit in the near future to looking into that specific spot and hopefully making the changes, and certainly will inform if we encounter some unforeseen roadblock. The rest of the update is speaking to the parking standard is more about, at least as far as I understand it, is about, so when we create an accessible parking space, something that often gets overseen is that there are no curb letdowns where that accessible parking space has been created, particularly a parallel parking space. And so that new standard being developed is wanting to look at how can we create curb letdowns to make accessible parking spaces actually accessible, so that the individual does not have to navigate through traffic to get to the corner. But in this case, it looks like that's not an issue, and we'll look specifically at that parking space to make
Okay.
changes.
Yeah, so, yeah, my recollection is that there's a few things related to accessible parking, you know, here. And part of it was this, like you say, the standard. The other thing was how many there should be on the street, like within a block. But yeah, what I was focused on was just Beacon Park for now, so that sounds great, thank you.
I'll look to see if there's any other questions on page 1 from any members. Seeing none, I'll move to page 2. Staff, Councillor, Mr. Newcomb.
So thank you, Chair. Just a quick update on the CRD EV charging project. Mr. Demar was kind enough to email me just now and inform me that we have received the agreement and it's in the works, so it is moving forward.
Mayor?
Thank you so much for that. Will it come to council, or does it need to come to council?
Yeah, he mentioned that it would be coming to council shortly. I'm not sure what shortly means, but
Thank you
fairly
again.
soon.
If there's nothing else, we'll go to page 2. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thanks. So on page 2, I'm just looking at the bottom of the page on the Parklands Needs Assessment, the very last one there. And we're saying that staff will move this project forward once the DCC bylaw is adopted. And I guess what I'm wondering, my understanding of the DCC process is first we figure out what we need across the town in terms of parks, infrastructure, and that sort of thing, and what the cost would be. And then we prepare a DCC bylaw on that. And so I'm uncertain as to why we would, it seems we're doing things the other way around, that we're doing the DCC bylaw first, and then we're doing the parks acquisition. And maybe it's, what I'm understanding from parks acquisition is that we would have some discussion about, we want to have so many parks and we think it's going to cost this amount of money, and therefore we're going to have to fund that in our DCCs. So I'm just wondering why we wouldn't do that before the DCCs.
I'll respond initially, but may turn to our Director of Planning or others for additional comments. But essentially, we know that parkland acquisition is incredibly expensive, and because property in Sydney is very expensive. And so we want to get the DCC bylaw approved and in place and operating as quickly as possible to start to generate DCC revenue. And regardless of what park we may be pursuing to acquire in the future, it is unlikely that the DCC revenue will come close to satisfying the acquisition entirely, and that we will likely either need to pull from other reserve funds or borrow money. And so we don't think that we're missing out on any great acquisition opportunities at this point in time. And so we feel that it's better to get the DCC bylaw in place and active so that we're generating revenue, and then we can focus on what the acquisition strategy will be like. We do know that there is a parkland deficit within the town, and that we do have some of the neighborhoods we have already identified, like the west side, as priority areas. But even there, in order to acquire one piece of property, which wouldn't be sufficient even for a pocket park, we won't have enough DCC revenue for many years to come close to even acquiring one piece of property. And so I'll turn to the Director of Planning to see if he has any additional comments.
Thank you. I would just add as well that the DCC bylaw is directed specifically at growth-related acquisition opportunities, and so that's not potentially every aspect of parkland acquisition. In some cases, we may be playing catch-up, or there's other areas just to make a park better, there might be an opportunity to add to it or something like that. Generally, though, with the DCC bylaw, it would be great to add, all of the parks we wanted that are growth-related to that. However, I think, at some point, there's a need to recognize that there's an upper limit to what can be funded through DCCs. We have a responsibility in that bylaw to ensure that the DCC rates themselves do not deter development. And so I think with the current draft of the DCC bylaw, staff got to a point where we were pretty comfortable with that balance between growth-related parkland acquisition and not deterring development.
Okay, thanks. I understand that rationale. I guess what was in my mind is my recollection when we reviewed the DCCs that there was a pretty large component devoted to parks. And so it just seemed to me that, council might want to look at the acquisition strategy first and see, okay, do we really want to, invest that many millions of dollars? And if we thought, no, we don't want to do that, then we might reduce that in the DCC bylaw with that kind of a more long-term kind of perspective. I don't know if that makes sense.
I think council is already committed to some significant park land acquisition, at least just in the west side, if not anywhere else. And again, when we look at the DCC bylaw as it currently stands, it's been significantly reduced in terms of the amount of revenue it anticipates to generate. It's anticipating generating $22 million over 20 years, so about $1 million a year. But that's spread across quite a variety of infrastructure, significant infrastructure projects, of which parkland acquisition is only just one component. So I would still recommend to stay the course with advancing the DCC bylaw first, and then looking at the parkland acquisition strategy at a later date.
Okay, thank you for that.
Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Thank you, Chair. Just on the same item, just want to clarify that the parkland acquisition strategy will indicate the neighborhoods that additional park or new park space would be required, but it's not going to be drilling down to properties.
Correct.
And really, and apart from the neighborhoods, it would indicate what process we would look to follow to acquire. Is that
correct? Some communities have been so bold as to identify properties and to say that we desire this entire area to become a park. And those are usually multi-decadal plans. But that puts a significant chill on that segment of the real estate market. And so that's a very bold approach, but it has been done. We're not looking to take that approach here. We'll be identifying broader neighborhood areas.
Thank you. Follow-up question, if I may, Chair, is again with it the project toward a draft for council's consideration once the DCC bylaw. We've heard earlier this evening the bylaw after coming back from the province would be before the end of this term, possibly third quarter. Are staff anticipating that it would be able to come back right away, or staff would see with the work left to be done that the timing is, quite frankly, sometime at the end of this term or actually into the next term?
I would anticipate that this would be a next term item.
Thank you.
Anyone else with any questions on this page? Seeing them, we'll move to page 3. Seeing none, we'll move to page 4. Councillor O'Keefe?
Thanks. Just going down to the very last one, DCCs again. And so the bylaw expected to be introduced in January and the waiver bylaw to come later. Question through you to staff. My recollection when we talked about this is that we were wanting to have, the council was wanting to have the waiver bylaw either before or at the same time that we were considering the DCC bylaw, because we wanted to kind of get a sense of how we would be able to, say, accommodate affordable housing or other things, other types of development based on waivers and that sort of thing. And so it seems that we're not doing that now. Because that was my, and I think it was Councillor Rentoul that might have mentioned that as well, so.
I believe that, I mean, my recollection of the discussion was that we understood that the approval process for the DCC bylaw will take many months, or could take many months. And that would give staff the time to then develop the DCC waiver bylaw such that prior to adoption of the DCC bylaw, the DCC waiver and reduction bylaw would also be considered. So essentially, the DCC bylaw would be brought forward for council's first, second, and third reading, and then advanced to the inspector of municipalities for consideration and approval. During that time, staff would be working on the DCC waiver and reduction bylaw, bringing that back ideally in at the same time that the DCC bylaw comes back from the inspector's office. That's my recollection of how the sequencing was going to work.
Okay.
And I believe it's reflected in this recommendation here.
Yeah, okay, that's good. I think, yeah, having you lay out that more specific timeline was helpful. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, thank you. Just to confirm, that was my recollection as well, and it sounded good at the time because I know the CRD, when we're doing the CRD with the water DCC bylaw, it's being done in the same way, with the main DCC bylaw being done first and then the waivers coming afterwards. So to the extent our municipalities are harmonizing a process for developers to be looking at, this will be par for the course. So I think this is good. Thanks.
Page 4, yeah. Mayor McGill-Smith?
Thank you, Chair. Just I guess a process question first through you, Chair, is now that we've covered all what turns out to be 25.
Oh, sorry. So I thought you were asking a question on page 4. I actually do have a question on page 4.
Oh, you go ahead first.
Sorry. So, 18th of August of 25, the active transportation plan option for Beacon Avenue West. It's mentioning to construct a temporary asphalt surface between the two developments at 2114 and 2180 Beacon once they've completed their portions. And I'm just wondering if that would be the same consideration given to 2114, technically 2098, I guess, towards the roundabout. Would we be doing something in that section as well, or would we leave that as is?
My understanding is that, sorry. So the question is like the remainder of the,
Yeah, we're talking about filling the gap between the work that would be done by the two proponents.
yes.
But I'm just wondering about from the one side to the roundabout, that there's
Yeah.
a small section there. Would we be also considering doing asphalt, temporary asphalt there as well?
That's my understanding, is that we would be trying to make that entire length feasible multi-use path.
Great,
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you. Sorry, Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you again. Sorry, process question is that now that we've had questions with regards to the 25 outstanding council action items, is that in moving on to the next agenda item, 8C and then going back to 8A, we're not specifically coming back to these outstanding council action items.
That's correct.
Okay. Second process question is, the next time that these outstanding council action items will come to council will be for the new council at their strat planning?
I think we do another action item update mid-year at around June. And so that would come back to this council at one of the June or early July council meeting to provide a status update on where we're at with them.
Okay, thank you. With those two process questions, a comment and a comment to colleagues and through to staff is that there's just a low-level concern that we're up to 25 outstanding items and that we added 10 items in 2025 and that we have items going as far back as 2021. When you look at the 2021 items, of which there are 3, and then there is 3 for 2022, which is now 4 and 5 years ago, is for some of those the timing isn't right. So for example, the Beacon West, the very first item, the Beacon West traffic study, in terms of staff to bring forward projects addressing other study recommendations through the annual budget process. Well, I'm not sure what the trigger will be for that to come to a budget process. And my earlier comment that it would be helpful to have timelines where possible, I don't see how a particular timeline, maybe staff will be able to give consideration and give a timeline to them, but I have concerns for some of these in terms of it being a bit ambiguous in terms of when it might come back. And a suggestion is, I'm not considering a motion, but I would welcome input from staff or colleagues on this, is that we ask staff in preparation for the next time this is coming forward, if it be June, that staff give consideration to, because quite frankly, it becomes a matter of priorities. We know there's staff capacity. We go through that each year when we do strat planning. We go through that each year when we do the annual budget. And we have had, council has in the prior term, the last term and this term, has rescinded certain motions where, quite frankly, it was no longer a priority. It was no longer feasible to see that go forward, given all of the other priorities that are there. And when I look at some of the priorities that were added in the past year, particularly the extreme weather center and the extreme weather shelter, council appreciates. We've said it in open session that impacts staff resource and could lead to the bumping of or change in timing of other staff work. So I'll just leave my comment there open to colleagues or staff in terms of going into this, reviewing this again about 6 months from now. I mean, I'll give another example. Is for me, something like the Parklands Needs Assessment, that's a pretty big project. It was initiated a little while ago. There's a lot of work. It's not going to come back for perhaps a year to us. Is when we look at experience, the last park acquisition we made was an opportunity that arose, and staff identified the opportunity in discussions with the community entities, the landowner and their advocates or consultants, and we moved forward on a particular initiative. Quite frankly, I can see our next parkland acquisition coming out of an opportunity arising, and I think, having gone through the process, that staff are looking for those opportunities, and quite frankly, do we need a parkland acquisition strategy? Perhaps yes in identifying the neighborhoods, but in terms of a detailed process about how we will conduct it, I think every situation is going to be unique, or situations will be unique in terms of how that arises. So I am honing in on one, but I think there are others that we could perhaps have further discussion whether, where it sits in terms of our priority and the feasibility of completing all of these in what, I mean, I think when we brought some of these forward in the earlier years, we thought that it was probably gonna be a year or two before they came forward. And now we're 4 or 5 years out with a lot of new ones. And so, it wasn't our exercise tonight to go through those and see what we could cull, but I just wanted to make that observation just in my 8th year of experience in the role. I'll leave my comments there.
Councillor Duck?
Yeah, I concur, and I think, you know, we're looking at some of the things that are 4 or 5 years old, and they still may be important, and I would think that when we come back to this in June or July, that maybe we can recategorize these with high, medium, and low priority, so that, you know, like park acquisition is a great example, like, it's gonna be an opportunity, so it's a low priority, and some stands to there, so not to lose sight of these, but at the same time, just to evaluate how feasible they are to accomplish and how high a priority they take, given staff time availability, and then we can look at the priority rather than looking at, you know, this one's 5 years old, so we should be looking at it or something like that, just to give us a better sense of that, and I think staff could help us with that. Thank you.
Councillor Rintoul?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. No, I concur. I mean, I don't want to see us get into it tonight because A, we weren't prepared to, and B, I think staff should be making recommendations from their perspective in terms of which of these may need to be rescinded or to prioritize them, as Councillor Duck had suggested. So yeah, that's something for the June meeting I would expect, if staff are clear on what council committee would like to see when it comes back at that point. Thank you.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. I agree with everything my colleagues are saying so far. It was actually something I was thinking about in terms of Mr. Wainwright had sent some suggestions about planning in general, strategic planning. And so I had been thinking about these items, also thinking about our strategic goals, thinking about all those I call auxiliary plans, you know, the climate action plan, the active transportation plan, all those other plans that are out there. And how do we pull all those things together? And so I think there's a number of things here, and I think, yeah, whether we go through some process once a year to think, are these strategic priorities, or do they become part of an auxiliary plan, or is there a different way of dealing with them? So I think it would be good to look at these things in relation to all of those other plans and things, work plans, and a way to kind of pull it all together and make it easier for everybody, I guess. Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Edwards?
Thank you, Chair. I think Council meets annually to discuss the strategic plan and always reviews these council action items in that process. So there is that opportunity to amend the strategic plan with any one of these council action items. So that's always been present and available to council. But with certainty, even some items in council's strategic plan end up being less of a priority than some items that are council resolutions from a regular meeting. And the emergency warming shelter is a prime example of that. And I would recommend to council for that one in particular that is a council strategic priority. It sure feels like it, the amount of attention and time that we've been putting to it. And that would be one that I would recommend be added. One of the few, if not the only, perhaps, that gets added in this time around. But yeah, I do think like that's an annual exercise really of looking at, okay, here's all of the initiatives that council has directed staff to work on. And then the council's strategic plan should be the utmost important prioritized initiatives. That's my perspective on things. I do like the idea of staff after this meeting looking at this with that kind of a lens of high, medium, low, and consideration for rescinding, and that kind of an approach in bringing this back to the June or July council meeting where it gets reviewed again, because I think it would be beneficial to council and staff to be able to have that prioritization. And with certainty, some of these items will carry forward through to the next term as well. So it's not likely that all of these are going to be completed by the end of this term.
Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Thank you, Chair, and through you, thank you, Mr. Edwards, for that comment. And one of the reasons I was talking about the timing earlier on is, and I think it would be helpful for council to look at this in June or July, is it will have our experience during this term to consider it. I would have otherwise recommended that it go to the next council, but they won't necessarily have the experience that the current council has in consideration of these items. So thank you for that.
So I will ask for one last time if there's anybody who has a question or comment on this item. And seeing none, we'll move on to 8C, which is the council referrals to 2026 strategic planning. Mr. Edwards?
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the first referral was from September 28th, 2025, that the letter from Mr. Wainwright, sorry, yes, I can't see my whole screen here, so the letter from Mr. Wainwright dated September 11th, 2025 regarding the impacts of the 5-year planning cycle be referred to the first strategic planning session for the next council in 2026. So staff have looked at this recommendation and have discussed it and the letter from Mr. Wainwright. And if the intent from Mr. Wainwright was for this current council to look at the letter and the planning cycle, if that's the intent, I think it's our recommendation would be the same for this council as it would be for the future council if the intent was for the future council to be looking at it. And we believe that while there are overlapping planning cycles from the various plans that are municipally initiated, as well as overlapping cycles with planning requirements from the province, and there's also other overlapping cycles, including the election cycle itself. These are the types of things that Mr. Wainwright was identifying and highlighting that there needed to be significant reflection upon. After staff's review, we believe that there's no action that's required to be taken. We don't see that there's any impending conflict that will cause concern for council or the public with any of the potential overlapping cycles. Whenever there may be a potential conflict with two planning time horizons that even are a requirement from the province, staff and council are capable of overcoming that potential conflict by either completing one plan earlier than as required, or seeking an opportunity for a deferral. And so staff's recommendation is that no action is required from this letter from Mr. Wainwright. I'll pause there before moving to the second one to see if there's any questions from council.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Thanks. Not a question. I guess maybe just a comment that I think there was some things in here that I thought would be interesting to reflect more on in terms of some of the takeaways for me about just kind of like in our I mentioned our previous discussion, the various plans we have, the way we track our progress on those, the way they're incorporated into strategic planning, into the 5-year budget planning process, how work plans and asset managed plans and 20-year infrastructure plans. There's just a lot of plans. And so I think for me as a counselor, if I'm here next term, I would appreciate spending some time on all these myriad of plans and how we're approaching them and how we stay on track with them. I think there was a municipality that got a UBCM award last year, the year before, in terms of how they manage all that. So I don't know, maybe there's some lessons to be learned there. There's also some comments just about engagement and how we engage the public in terms of strategic planning and maybe financial planning. So those are things I'd be interested in looking at as well, but not today. And so I guess my only comment is when we get to the next strategic planning session in the new council term, those are some of the things for me that I would be interested in looking at, not proposing any direction to staff or anything like that, just that's how I'm feeling at the moment about some of those things. Thank you.
Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Thank you, Chair. I don't, I just have a comment as well, and that is, I'll thank Mr. Wainwright for forwarding this to council and for staff, the consideration staff has given. It does, as Mr. Wainwright points out at the beginning and at the end, the processes for local government have become more complex, and one of the reasons they've become more complex is because of the provincial legislation and downloading. And so a takeaway from me, there's two takeaways for me here. One is that with some of the provincial requirements, whether it's 5-year OCP reviews or housing needs assessments or what have you, in the way some of those lead from one step to another, such as a zoning bylaw review occurs after an OCP review, is that it just requires that you look out a little further. And so, you know, I think the next council could come back to this to say that, you know, we do need to look, you know, a reasonable distance out, as far as 3, 4, 5 years out, in terms of the timing of and how these things are in some ways sequential. The second is with regards to the 5-year financial plan, and just a paragraph, while various projects mentioned above are not included in the 2025 to 2029 financial plan, so they weren't identified as specific projects. The plan includes amounts ranging from 150 to 175,000 over 3 or 4 years as anticipated projects. So, I mean, we're aware. We've learned this through previous budget, through the review of our previous budgets, that staff are looking a number of years in advance to allocate these projects. And that they'll continue to do so to be allocating those reasonable amounts, and perhaps those, you know, because of the requirements from the provincial government, perhaps some of those amounts are going to increase going forward. So I'll leave my comments there. Thank you.
If there's no other quorum, go ahead, Mr. Evers, number 2.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So item 2 is from December 15th, 2025, and it was regarding the Enhanced Flood Inundation Modeling and Mapping Project, and the request was that staff bring a report on establishing a flood construction level bylaw, and council determine the priority level at the strategic planning session being planned in the new year. And so regarding this piece, I will turn to the Director of Planning for additional comment, but I did want to just say that there are some concerns about bringing forward the flood construction bylaw on its own without a broader strategic plan to accompany it. And so I'll turn to the director to share his thoughts on this.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think the challenge with moving straight to a flood construction level bylaw here is that it will by necessity be a very, with apologies to my colleague next to me, a very engineering focused approach. The by setting a flood construction level on a property, what we're essentially saying to property owners is, we need you to build to this level. Inevitably, I think property owners will turn to a, engineer to provide them with a solution to do that. I think staff see those solutions as being very hard from the perspective of, there'll be retaining walls or boulder stacked seawalls, essentially armoring against inundation from sea level rise and storm surge, et cetera. What I think staff have heard over the past several years from the community is that the environmental aspects of Sydney's foreshore are very important to them. And we don't believe that the flood construction level bylaw will give us, I think, due consideration of those environmental components that could be potentially incorporated into protecting the town's foreshore against future sea level rise or future storm surges. And staff admittedly do not have the expertise in those areas to be able to bring forward solutions. Staff are not able to do that as part of a flood construction level bylaw. Essentially, at this point, all we'd be able to do is look at the work that's been done in establishing those flood construction levels in the recent project, and transfer those numbers into a bylaw, and leave it to the property owner's engineer or other professional to bring forward a solution. What I think staff are looking at is a more contextual approach, where we're trying to find a balance between that environmental preservation side of things and the shoreline protection side of things. To do that, we need the expertise of an outside organization or firm, and the method for doing that is the proposed adaptation and mitigation plan that has been forwarded to the budget process.
Councillor Duck?
Yeah, thank you, staff. And in consideration of that, so how do we move forward if we don't have a bylaw in place? Do we continue to use the volunteer sort of assumption we got right now? And are we with that, or can we build into it those environmental protections that we anticipate putting into a bylaw? I'm a little confused that we're leaving the door open to things like 10393 All Bay happening without some sort of structure in there to mitigate the destruction of that environmental foreshore and subsequent rock wall building. So how do we manage that in the absence of a bylaw? And are we still depending on the volunteer FCL that we have in place right now?
So through the chair to Councillor Duck, first of all, I'd like to point out that the situation at 10393 All Bay arose because the property owner there worked without a permit. So that was, well, we can put all the bylaws and regulations and guidelines in place that we are able to, but if someone doesn't get a permit, it's pretty tough to. I think there are interim measures that we could take. If the committee can recall the details of the recent report that council received on this, the inshore flood construction level was 4.12 meters. Currently, we have a policy that says where anything is proposed below 5 meters of geodetic elevation, we'd like to see that engineer's report and a solution for protecting the property. That 5 meter number could be amended in the interim to 4.12, which is the recommendation of this report. The more challenging area is on those foreshore properties that typically have that higher FCL. And I would say even with the flood construction level bylaw, some of those numbers are high enough that achieving them is close to being impractical. And so we need to look at broader solutions beyond just the FCL bylaw to be able to provide a solution for some of those properties.
Agreed, yes. I think, the challenge we face is it's not from blue water flooding, because that's the 4.1 to 5 or whatever, because that's in the next 70 years kind of thing. It's the whitewater flooding that we've got to protect against, and that's what I'm hoping that we can create. If we don't have a flood construction level bylaw, how do we manage those situations with the current recommended FCL mitigation, and how do we add those other pieces to protect our foreshore and the threat of blue water or whitewater flooding?
So the current process that we have would continue to apply. It's not an ideal one. And certainly I think we do need a flood construction level bylaw. I think what staff are saying is that we will get there. What we'd like to do in the interim is look at how can we make that flood construction level bylaw a more comprehensive piece of regulation that will try to balance some of these environmental preservation considerations. That's not to say that we're doing nothing in the interim. I think we are, as an interim approach, pretty well set up to deal with risks to properties through this one property by one property approach that we've been taking for the last several years. To get to a point where there might be broader solutions and not just a one property by one property approach, I think we need someone to look at how could a reach, as the report refers to stretches of shoreline, how could that reach potentially be protected in a way that doesn't involve single seawalls on each property? Is there some other way to approach this that might be achievable and still not have to rip off parts of the shoreline and put a boulder stack seawall or what have you back in?
Thank you, Steph. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the direction you're giving us on that, because I think that's appropriate that we do invest that time into a flood construction level bylaw that does manage both aspects that and we continue with the interim measure with that and staff guidance on those programs. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Novak?
Thank you, Chair, and through you to staff. Just listening to all this gives me some concern that now that we've gotten that first report, and council went to the trouble of passing that resolution to ask staff to work on a flood construction level bylaw. It's the sort of thing that, once it's out there and once we're seen to be discussing it and considering it, if we don't do something about it, I feel that might open us up to some kind of liability. It's sort of like, yeah, we thought that this might be important, but then we decide not to do it. And then if something bad happens because we don't have that bylaw in place, I feel it exposes us. And I understand when staff say that we're looking at working at the bylaw somewhere down the line. I prefer that it be a little less vague, because it does put us in this awkward position of knowing that a potential risk exists, but we're not doing enough to at least provide the tools for mitigation for those people who will be developing properties after the fact.
Mr. Edwards or Mr. Newcomb, or both?
Thank you, Chair. I want to just, there's a couple things there that I'd like to respond to. And first and foremost, I want to put your mind at ease to know that we're not exposed unduly from a liability standpoint with regards to this. Our current practice is ensure that, any of the projects going forward have a qualified professional engineering stamp of approval on it, and it's that qualified professional that is stating their professional reputation, or putting their professional reputation on the line by saying that the construction elevation for this property is sufficient to avoid any risk of flooding, and that absolves the town from any liability. And the town is very careful and very risk adverse with regards to these types of things, and we would never advance initiatives that would expose us to undue liability. So I feel very comfortable and very confident that we're not being unduly exposed to any risk here. And I do also want to bring us back to the broader approach to this initiative, which was, and I believe there was a resolution passed to pursue a climate adaptation strategy based on the report from the technical engineers on the flood inundation modeling and mapping. And it's that broader strategy that council endorsed, that staff have started looking at, like how would we piece together a multifaceted approach to addressing and adapting to the impacts from climate change. And that this recommendation that we're looking at right here and right now was a sort of an offshoot from that, from council's desire to look at the possibility of establishing this bylaw separately and on its own in advance of that broader strategy coming forward.
So,
You have the floor.
so that raises the question, if what you're suggesting is that we have enough data, we have the inundation modeling and mapping, the CRD has done modeling and mapping for much of the coast, at least in our area, and if the suggestion is that a developer or a homeowner is going to consult a qualified professional, and that qualified professional is going to necessarily do whatever is necessary to ensure that the project is safe, my question is simply then, why do we need the bylaw? Maybe I'm missing something, but what's the bylaw going to give us that, at your suggestion, we don't already have in place?
I think the bylaw will address two things, and likely more, but the two primary elements is one, to ensure a consistent approach to flood construction elevations. So already we've seen that some engineers will sign off on flood construction elevation that might be different for a neighboring property. And so that's that individual engineer stating with their professional credentials that that elevation is satisfactory. What staff believe might be a better approach just for form and character of neighborhoods, if nothing else, is that there's a consistent elevation that we would like to see buildings being built at, so we don't end up with this up and down levels of like perhaps the first floor. You know, you're always going to have different roof elevations, and that actually I think adds to a nice character of a community. But already I can't remember which corner it is. I think it's 3rd and Orchard or 4th and Orchard. You'll see that there is a development that's quite elevated from the road elevation, and so what we would like to see as that neighborhood gets redeveloped and over time is that there's a consistent approach, and that's where the bylaw would ensure that there's that consistent approach. And then I think our planner or our director of planning spoke more eloquently about this than I can, but about how we balance that protection of property and community against the need to preserve the environment and achieve some other council strategic priorities and goals around, you know, minimizing our impact on the foreshore and the ocean, as well as the upland environment as well. And so staff are recommending that we go slower on developing the bylaw so that we can implement and consider some of those softer approaches than what would likely be a more hardscape seawall type approach with if we were to establish the bylaw based on our available data and information at this point in time. I turn to the Director of Planning if he's got something to add there.
And one final question. If we do go ahead with this bylaw, and if by chance the provincial government moves ahead with that bill M216, would there be a conflict?
Not necessarily. I mean, if the provincial government goes ahead with Bill M216, sorry, I'm stumbling over this. You know, just for council's information, for those that might not remember what Bill M216 is all about, it's essentially restricting the ability for councils to contest or challenge a decision by a qualified professional such as an engineer, and it constrains the ability to challenge that decision. And so currently we rely on those engineers for a great deal of things that we do in town, including identifying what the flood construction level should be for a building. The only real difference with M216, if that came into place, is that we wouldn't be able to commission our own engineer to do a comparative analysis and sort of question that first engineer's report. 216 essentially limits our ability to challenge that initial engineering decision, and it would then be funneled through the I can't remember the name of the office, but it's essentially like the Commissioner of Professionals. It's a separate office, but it creates a whole new challenge process, which would be much more cumbersome and difficult.
Thank you. I think I'll leave it there, because to continue that discussion, we could go on for quite some time, and it's probably not helpful. But thank you, Chair.
Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question at this stage, because we're going to be going back to 8A. What year did the province implement FCL for local governments, for municipalities? I'm sorry, I'm just forgetting.
I don't know that the province implemented or that there was a year where the province implemented.
Well, there was a year that there was a time when municipalities were required to implement FCL, in the sense that you required an engineer's report on FCL. I mean, we haven't been doing that for forever.
I'd have to look into that in more a little more deeply to be able to answer that question, but I'm not sure that there was a year in which the province then said you must establish FCLs.
No.
Mr. Newcomb?
Thank you. So there are covenants on some properties in town that date back to, I believe, the 80s that speak to flood hazard risks and things like that. So staff have been, aware of the potential for flooding in some areas, and in some cases when development has happened, have taken action to try to mitigate against those risks. The mechanism for the current process, which on a case-by-case basis, we can require an engineer to assess the property and certify that it's safe for the use intended, is a clause in the Local Government Act. Not sure how long that clause has been there, but it may date back to the Municipal Act. I'm not sure how far back it goes, but that's the mechanism. And I think the recent growing use of this is just an awareness of generally amongst municipalities and staff that this is a potential issue and one that we should be planning for.
Thank you. If I could just request.
Sorry, Ms. Verhagen, did you have a comment?
Just to add to Mr. Newcomb's comments there, the Local Government Act for BC does stipulate that municipalities may adopt a flood hazard bylaw or a floodplain bylaw. And if they do, they must consult the flood hazard area land use management guidelines that are published by the province. I can't recall any specific date by which a municipality must adopt a floodplain bylaw or a minimum flood construction level bylaw, or when that was brought in by the province. But as Mr. Newcomb said, we have been requiring covenants on low-lying properties for decades.
Okay, so just to clarify, I wasn't indicating that the province had indicated that that municipalities were required to have a flood control bylaw. My understanding is that there was a requirement to have FCLs considered.
Right.
So what I'm hearing from staff is that this has been part of the Local Government Act for some time, but can staff indicate when?
Our policy in the town of Sydney came into effect in 2017. And there may in fact be a point in time when the province did require professional engineers to sign off on FCLs. I would want to do a little more research to get an accurate date there, but it you know, consistent with what our directors were saying, it was in the 1980s when there was a lot of work being done by the province on flood hazard areas, and but I don't believe there was a requirement at that time to establish flood construction levels. If anything, that would have been more recent, and so we can look into that to see if there is a specific point in time when the province did require it for development in flood-prone areas. But for the town of Sydney, we did implement the policy in 2017.
That's helpful, thank you very much.
Does anybody else want to provide any comments or questions on this item? Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. Through you to staff. So I completely understand and I think it makes good sense what staff has said in terms of wanting to have more time to consider those environmental impacts. My recollection when we talked about this was that there was that broader strategy that was an option, but that was going to take a lot of time, and it was going to not just FCL, impacts to infrastructure, to the environment, to roads, all kinds of things. And so the reason we kind of backed off of that big plan was because it's complicated, costly, would take a long time, and also in terms of the sea level stuff, it seemed that wasn't going to impact us for about 75 years. So my recollection is kind of we devolved to, okay, well, let's work on the FCL things first. So I think that's how we arrived at this. But I guess what I'm wondering now is, so are staff proposing that we do the big plan, or are they proposing that we still do FCL but with some other things in there to cover off the environmental aspects? So are we going for the big bang plan, or are we going kind of for a scaled down version that just focuses on the FCLs and the environmental aspects?
Thank you, Councillor. I've asked our corporate officer to just confirm, but I do believe council did pass a resolution to pursue the big plan. Yeah, there was a resolution from that meeting that the development of a coastal flood hazard mitigation and adaptation plan be forwarded to the 2026 budget deliberations, and that the following grant application be forwarded to budget deliberations. The climate ready plans and process funding stream offered by FCM to fund the development of a coastal flood hazard mitigation and adaptation plan, and the foundations of disaster risk reduction funding stream offered by UBCM to fund the development of a coastal flood hazard mitigation and adaptation plan, carried unanimously. And so, and then there was a motion arising from that, which resulted in this motion that we're looking at right now. So staff are intending to essentially look at bringing the larger plan, the big plan, as part of the 2026 budget deliberations, and that would, and staff would be continuing to pursue that if it gets approved through those the budget deliberations.
Okay, so but this would, what's being proposed by staff tonight is kind of it's related to that, but it could be a standalone thing. So would we still have to to approve the big plan, or could we still move ahead with that? And I guess what I'm thinking is, I know that we're likely to have some challenging discussions at budget time. So is this, what staff are proposing here today on FCL, is something that could be carved off and done separately without having to do the great big one?
So council asked staff to bring a report on establishing a flood construction level bylaw, and for council to determine the priority level at this meeting tonight for that work. After considering it further and in preparation for this meeting, staff have are making the recommendation that we don't pursue the flood construction level bylaw at this time in isolation of that larger initiative, and that we stay the course of pursuing the larger initiative and development of the flood construction bylaw, ideally to include those broader elements we've talked about, and perhaps to have other policy positions or pieces that would complement the bylaw. Does that clarify where staff's position is right now?
Yeah. Thank you for that. I wasn't sure if it was part of the big thing or a separate thing, so that's, yeah, no, I got it. So, and I guess, so we would discuss that more further at, during budget in terms of whether to go forward with the big plan, and this would be part of that.
Correct. We would
Okay.
need and want council's approval to apply for those grant programs, for the grant funding to pursue that that larger plan initiative.
Okay, and I guess, not necessarily to have answers now, but when we go to consider that, things that I would be interested in having some information on is there a way for us to, if we didn't go forward with the big plan, is there a way for us still to do what staff want to do in a smaller sort of way? So, and I guess what I'm thinking of is, if the concern is environmental issues, are there areas that we could focus on specifically to address staff's concern?
We still need to hire professionals to support us in that endeavor. And that, I mean, it's entirely possible that we could try to scale down the scope or the size of the initiative, but the preference would be to seek the grant funding to offset the costs of hiring the professionals to help us develop
Okay,
the best possible plan to go forward with.
okay, thank you for that.
Mayor?
Thank you, Chair. So just a clarification, is that, in terms of the motion that staff read out, reminding us what we moved at that meeting, my understanding is the motion was that staff bring forward to the budget for the 2026 and 2027 year. So my understanding from that, which I think I tried to clarify at that meeting, was that if we're seeking budget amounts for 2026 and 2027 to work on the big plan, engage consultants, and come back with a plan, it's going to be later in 2027 that staff bring forward the big plan. And hence, it was my motivation, rather than waiting for approximately 2 years, to clarify that it was well understood that as part of the big plan, staff would likely be bringing back, or would likely come back in that plan, a recommendation regarding FCL, whether it's a bylaw. I mean, I've heard staff tonight say that we are probably going to be doing a bylaw eventually, or we will do a bylaw eventually, but we want to do it in the context of the rest of the big plan. But my motivation was to bring it forward, is to not wait. I'm not going to motivate now. I'm going to wait till we get back to 8A to make a motion and motivate at that time. But I just wanted to provide the clarification of the big plan being budgeted for 26, 27. Thank you.
Mr. Newcomb.
Thank you, Chair. One area that Mr. Edwards mentioned earlier that staff consistently struggle with in this in this area is the sort of sawtooth effect that was mentioned, where, you know, depending on the engineer that looks at the property, they seem to have different opinions of what an appropriate FCL is. One potential option on the backshore properties to overcome that in the near term is to amend that policy elevation of 5 meters down to what the recent report specified as the recommended FCL of 4.12 meters. Staff haven't looked in this in too much detail, but the outcome of doing that may result in property owners saying, okay, I'm going to build at 4.12 meters, don't need an engineer, that's the elevation I'm going to go with. Save money by not hiring the engineer, we'll just build to that elevation and move forward. That may result in properties having that sort of, you know, standard grade more broadly across the community, and I think that's one potential interim option we could take. The other aspects of the FCL bylaw that, you know, that we want to look at in the future do need that broader look at what, you know, what are the environmental impacts of implementing this bylaw, especially on the foreshore. So again, I'd be reluctant to dive into an FCL bylaw right now, but I think there are some potential amendments to the policy that we have currently that may be beneficial.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you for that, Mr. Newcomb. That was kind of things I was thinking of when I was talking about scaled down version, like other options. And I recall looking at that map that we now have more detail about what, there's different FCLs for certain areas. And if they weren't in environmentally sensitive areas, whether that's kind of what I was referring to. So I would be interested in hearing more about that in the future. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we've had fulsome discussion on that, so I think we'll switch around to item 8A, and I'm not sure
Point
how
of
the
order?
CA... Oh, yeah, absolutely. You want to take a break?
Yes, please, if we could take a small recess?
Yeah, we'll give you 5 minutes, or we'll give you to 8:20. How's that? Thank you. All right. We'll resume the meeting at this point in time, and so we're heading back to 8A, and I will hand the floor over to our CAO, Mr. Edwards, to guide the discussion.
Okay, I'll just go back to the items that we said we'd look back at, and the first one is under Goal 1, number 4, the creation of a tenant protection bylaw. I think we were looking at changing the completion date.
That's right. This is recommended that the completion date be changed to the end of Q1 2026.
I'll move that, Chair, if you're looking for some traction here.
Thank you, Councillor Rintoul. Do we have a seconder? Second by Councillor Novak. Councillor Rintoul?
No, it's Q1 2026, so makes sense to me.
Man of many words. Thank you. Councillor Novak, do you have anything to add?
I think Councillor Rintoul said it all.
Does anyone have anything they'd like to add? All right. Oh, Councillor O'Keefe?
Ideally, it would have been done last quarter, but it didn't. I think part of that is, you know, we asked staff to do a lot to get the emergency shelter in place. And I presume this is something that took time away from planning staff. To insist that it's to be completed last quarter makes no sense. So if it's going to be done this first quarter, that makes sense to me.
No one else? Okay, I guess I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries unanimous.
Point of order.
Point of order.
If I could just get clarification on what we're doing here. I think the CAO referred to it when he first presented it, but I'm understanding that we're looking at these items on the strategic plan, and are we reordering them by priority, and are we deleting and adding them? Is that kind of what we're doing here? or
We're just, I believe we're, sorry, but I believe we're just making amendments as per council's direction through the discussions that took place originally.
But I did hear earlier on there were some suggestion of deleting some that weren't going to be accomplished. Yeah, just to be clear. I just want the process clear.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. So we're going to go through the strategic plan and touch on the items that staff have either identified that need to be amended. There was only one, I believe, that was being recommended for removal. And then also we can touch on any items that council would like to consider amendments for too.
So to that point, are the current strategic priorities and actions in priority order? Or are they just listed?
No, they're not prioritized in the plan.
Okay.
Yes, this is-
I'm wondering, do we need to give that direction to staff as to what, because we've had some discussion around higher priorities and that sort of thing. Thank you.
Would staff's intent just to have them listed, or would you prefer a prioritized list?
I think if we're identifying completion dates, and given that we effectively have 3 quarters to work on this, that will be sufficient. I don't think we would need further prioritization at this time.
Mayor?
Thank you, Chair. So just for clarification then, number 1 and number 2, given that they're complete, will be removed from the plan, from the updated strat plan.
I would leave that to council's choice as to whether to remove them or leave them there. You know, for just a visual reminder to the public that these were priorities that council did work on and did achieve in their term. I think if I haven't actually looked at what would be remaining if we removed all the completed pieces.
Thank you. Sorry, council has in previous strat plan updates removed the completed items.
Okay. Well then, yes, then we would.
Just want to concur with that, on that.
Councillor O'Keefe?
I think we've done either in some years, but I think Mr. Edwards comment is a good one in terms of, it's the final, sort of year of this term. And so I think there is some value just to leaving them in there to show completed. So
Mayor?
I'd be okay with that.
Mayor?
Sorry, if I can continue with the floor. So I will move a motion to remove the completed items, and if I have a seconder, I'll motivate.
Second.
Thank you. So it has been past practice. This strat plan is shorter than the strat plan was the year previous and before that, and we did that through the 4 years of the previous term. I will note that, for example, North Saanich had a strat plan process for 5 or 6 years, whereby when they completed an item, it went to an appendice at the back of the strat plan so that you could see throughout the entire term what was in the original strat plan and then what had been completed. I suggested that in a previous year. We didn't move forward with it, and that's fine. But I think being consistent that we've already removed items that we've completed this term. I'll leave my motivation there.
Councillor Duck?
Yeah, I would support it because of just that thing, and I think the idea of actually moving to an appendice, sort of, there's public want to see what has been accomplished, there's a reference point. But that was kind of what I was getting at, determining priorities, is just to show, because you look at even a list of 4 items, you're going, where are we with those? If the ones that are done and gone, you're just looking at what's to be completed in the next 3 quarters, as the CAO has identified, and it becomes very clear what we're working on. Thank you.
Any other comment, questions? I'll move, call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? We have 1 opposed. Councillor Rintoul, motion carries. Mayor?
Thank you. With regards to item 3, implementing the housing policies and initiatives, it has a completion of Q4 2026. Q4 is October, November, December. And so I don't anticipate, or I'd ask staff to clarify that staff don't anticipate bringing back any of those initiatives that say Q4 necessarily prior to the municipal election. And so my preference would be to, under completion, to put next term, and those initiatives would come to the next council during their strat plan session, which won't occur because the inaugural meeting isn't until November, and typically strat plan hasn't been done until January, into early part of the new year of the new term. Does staff have a comment in terms of changing it from Q4 2026 to next term?
No, thank you, Mayor. I agree with that approach. I think that makes a lot of sense, and there would be some other items here that would have that new terminology added.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Just a question on that. So is it that staff won't be prepared to bring those items forward at that time, or that because it's an election year, we're thinking that we should hold back on those?
I don't think staff will hold back on the work that's underway for those initiatives, but more so that there may not be the opportunity. Given the inaugural meeting for the new council will be the beginning of November, there will only be a couple of meetings where actual business can occur, and depending on what's happening at that time, that it may not be a priority for the new council.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that.
So do we need a motion for that, to change that to me? Or is that?
Yes, a motion to change that would be appreciated.
So moved.
A second.
Motivator? Seconder?
Yeah, it clarifies that for a reader that while we are serving for part of Q4, that the understanding is that it's not coming back. These important initiatives like that wouldn't normally come back right before the election.
Councillor O'Keefe?
I was okay leaving it where it is, and as I said before in previous comments, the thing about non-market housing has been an important priority for this council, the priority before, and I just worry about kicking the can down the road a little bit further. If there was any chance that it could come back in Q4 2026, I'd be quite happy with that, rather than leaving it again for another council, brand-new council to review. Yeah, I'm happy to leave it where it is and see where it goes.
Anyone else? Call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? One opposed. Councillor O'Keefe is opposed. Mr. Edwards, would you like to continue?
So the next item is under goal number 2, item
Oh.
number 1, planning.
Actually, if I may,
Mhm.
sorry, if I may, I was just thinking aloud to myself. Under number 1, having mentioned earlier about the shelters, that should it go under number 1?
I was gonna come back to items.
Oh, yeah, we were gonna come back to that later, but if maybe it's better to just ensure we addressed everything within each goal as we go. And so, yeah, I would recommend that council add the establishment of a emergency weather shelter, weather response shelter, I think, to goal number 1, which would become priority item number 5 for completion by Q3 2026.
Councillor Duck? We have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Novak. Would you like to motivate, Councillor Duck?
I think this is already in progress, so it's important that we do record it and show that it's being done and executed within the term of this current council, which is Q3.
Councillor Novak?
We've certainly discussed this enough, and I think it's a good idea to at least get it up on the strategic plan, so it becomes evident both for us, and if for some reason it doesn't get done this year, then it'll be there for next council.
Mayor?
Thank you. I support the motion. A question through to staff is, if staff could just read back the wording, please.
Your mic's on.
Sorry, it would be, I don't know exactly how to word that, but the establishment of an emergency weather shelter, a response shelter, just looking at the wording, to establish, council to establish?
For staff to
If I could just,
yes, sorry.
suggest, I mean, we see elsewhere in the plan, the words explore
Yeah.
or consider. Given that it's not a
Establish.
certainty, that I think the word consider should be staff, because council will be considering.
Consider establishment.
So
Sorry,
In
Councillor.
Q3, which would be, the intention is, I think
Right.
staff said the end of August,
Right.
so that it could be submitted.
Staff intend to bring back the necessary recommendations to amend the OCP and zoning bylaw such that a emergency weather response shelter could be established in the fall of this year. But I do think we have to be careful how we word it, because staff won't be in a position to establish a shelter. But rather, staff can bring back the recommendations to council for bylaw amendments, and then it's council's decision to make those amendments, and then it's a further decision with Beacon Community Services and property owner to actually establish it. So I think
If we could leave the wording for staff, the exact wording, and we will see that at council meeting next week.
Yep.
sure. Okay.
Councillor O'Keefe?
yeah, I was just wondering, was this one of our, was it in our action items? And I was just trying to recall what was the wording we used when we provided the direction in staff, and whether that wording, because I think we're past the point of considering.
It was to continue to explore the establishment of a extreme weather response shelter with St. Andrews
Yes.
Anglican Church.
Yes, continue to explore.
Okay, yeah, so I don't know, whatever we said before, it seems it should be consistent with what we put in our plan. So,
Councillor Rental, you had your hand up?
No, thank you. It's been addressed. I think the original motion was perhaps too direct in a sense, and so I think this revision has addressed it. Although I think it should be the mover and seconder have to reconfirm they're comfortable with the changes.
Perfect, thank you. Mover and seconder? We're comfortable?
Yes.
Any other discussion, questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries unanimous. Mr. Edwards?
Before we move on to goal number 2, are there any further amendments to goal number 1 that council might want to see?
Councillor Duck?
Yeah, do you want to, or have we already changed the tenant protection bylaw completion date?
Yeah,
We did, that
Okay.
was the
Yeah.
first motion,
Yeah.
to Q1 to
And-
2026.
Okay, so all, then the others will fall off because they're completed, correct?
Number 3 remains,
Right.
and with a change of the completion
Yep.
date to
Yes.
a new term?
So there'll be 3 strategic priorities under goal number 1.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Do you want to?
I'm revisiting a motion we passed earlier in terms of changing completion from a Q4 2026 to next term. I think there may be, having thought about some of the concern expressed, we could say Q4 2026 next term, which is an indication of what the timing is next term, as staff have provided this council. But it's also indicating that it wouldn't come forward to this council, it would be going forward to the work would be coming forward to the next council.
Councillor Duck?
Would it? That's the question, because based on the council's schedule, the first inaugural meeting's not until the beginning of November, and the first real business is not until the end of November. I'm just thinking in real terms, is it accomplishable for a new council? Are we putting a little weight on that, because they would have to hit the ground running to get it done in that time? And I think it's just fair to say they may have other views, and that information then coming from staff, I think you're just putting a very tight timeline on getting that done. I appreciate the concept, but I'm just wondering if it's realistic.
Yeah, so the new council will have, 4 or 5, even 6 meetings between inauguration and Christmas. And that if staff,
I don't see how that's possible.
sorry, between council and Cal,
Oh, okay, including Cal, okay.
3 in December, 3 in November. The thing is I'm seeking input from staff on this, that if this current strat plan indicated that it would come forward in Q4, if staff is still comfortable with that, then the suggestion is that we put Q4 next term, which is an indication it is coming back on that timing, but it is going to the next council. And so, to use a term from a colleague, it's not potentially appearing to kick it down the can farther, because that certainly wasn't the intention.
From a staff perspective, I don't see a problem with that, and I mean, we must keep in mind that we can't compel a future council to adhere to this prioritization, but we can. I don't see a problem of keeping it as 2026 Q4 next.
But the other thing that it removes is the impression that the next council will be determining the timing of that coming back. If it's staff intention to bring it back in Q4 to the new council, then they would do that. If they had to advise the new council that they weren't able to do so, such as, for whatever the circumstances are, so be it. But it's indicating intention, is my
Councillor O'Keefe?
So I'll move that change, which is an amendment. It's not an amendment, it's a new motion. From next term to the anticipated completion quarter and next term.
Do you have a seconder?
I'll second for discussion.
Do you have any more motivation? Councillor O'Keefe?
So I'm in favor of leaving it in Q4 2026, but I'm not certain how I feel, well, I know how I feel about leaving it to say next term. I would just leave it open, Q4 2026, and I'm not too bothered about what the next council wants to do with that or not, and whether they're a new council that it's gonna take them some time to get up to speed on it, so be it. That's just how it works. When you join council, there's stuff that comes, you get presented, you read the report, you do a bit of background research, you ask staff questions, and you make a decision. So I don't think we should be kicking it down into 2027, so to speak, or later, just because we think the next council might have trouble absorbing all that information. I have confidence that they would. And so that's why while I'm sort of supportive with the motion, I'm more inclined to support it if it was just left as 2026 Q4.
Councillor Duck?
Good argument.
Point of clarification.
Yep.
Just to clarify Councillor O'Keefe's statements, we've already voted on a motion to move this to the next council, essentially.
Yes.
Yep.
So the suggestion that we leave it at Q4 2025, I don't think is at hand or speaking to the motion that's before us, to the chair.
Q4 2025, I believe it's Q4 2026 that was.
Correct. At any rate, I think my point is made. Like, I believe the previous speaker spoke with respect to the status of the plan that was presented to us. We've already voted on that motion. We've already changed the dates, and now it's being revisited on a different suggestion. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. I feel like we probably are.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Thank you. Councillor Novak?
Thank you, Chair. Was it not staff who suggested that it might be difficult to actually meet that Q4 2026 timing because of the election and because of how the year might roll out? Isn't that why we made the motion in the first place?
Is that a question for staff?
For anybody who cares to answer.
I'll pose it to staff.
Yes, it was staff that made that point, and perhaps for simplicity, I mean, staff will continue to work on these issues as best they can, regardless of the election. And if an item is within a staff's work plan and it's ready to come forward to council, regardless of it being a new council or this council, we would try to advance it on the agenda. And so I think, excuse me, having the term 2026 Q4 next term, just signals to the public that this may not get completed in this council term. If it's left alone as 2026 Q4, to me, I read that as not getting completed by this council in this term. So I think either way, we're signaling to the public that there's a chance that this item will not be completed in this council's term. And the idea of changing the completion date to 2026 Q4 next term just provides a little more clarity that likelihood exists. That's my thinking on it.
Councillor Novak?
Since the motion on the floor is to leave the completion date at 2026 Q4 for item number 3 and goal 1, just to make sure we're all on the same page.
It's
No?
just, it's adding next term to it as well. So it'd be 2026 Q4 next term would be what would be in that box.
Point of privilege.
Yep.
The intention of the motion is not only for this particular motion, but any other
Yep.
motions that have a Q4 2026.
My concern is not with whether it's this council or next council. My concern is whether Q4 2026 as a completion date is a realistic completion date, because that's the whole point of having a strategic plan. It's got to be realistic. And if staff is telling us that it's not realistic, then why do we want to bring the date back to Q4 2026?
Point of privilege.
Councillor Duck?
Per Councillor Rintoul's point, I think this date has already been set, if I'm just correct me, as next term. That's the current status of this. Right. So,
The motion on the floor is to rescind that and bring it back to what's on the chart.
I understand that, but the actual motion wasn't to rescind.
No.
So, right now, we're actually debating a motion that we'd have to rescind the previous motion first to be over, even consider this. So I'm just wondering, I appreciate the mayor's position here, but are we at odds here?
Point of order. I don't consider it a necessity. I would look to staff, but I don't consider there is a need to rescind the previous motion, because this motion is a different motion than the original motion or the motion that was previously passed. This is a different motion. It's not going back to the old motion. It's a different motion.
Councillor Duck?
Speaking to the motion and the comments from staff, I think that by leaving it as the next council, the next term, as is indicated in the existing timing on this, achieves both purposes. It'll be in the new council that looks at it, if it's in Q4, and if it's in Q1 of 2027 or wherever the next council puts it, it's already captured within the completion date as established by the previous motion. Thank you.
I'm gonna look for the corporate officer. If you could actually read the motion that was on the floor, please.
The motion was to change the completion date of item number 3 for the implement housing policies initiatives with a focus on non-market housing. So it was at 2026 Q4. It was then changed to next term, and now this motion here on the floor is to change that from 2026 Q4 to next term.
The motion is to change it to, sorry, the motion is to change it Q4 2026 next term,
Yes.
Combining the two.
combining the two.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay, thank you.
Okay, so I think we've had enough discussion, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna put the matter to a vote. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Opposed are Councillor Novak, Councillor O'Keefe, Councillor Rintoul, Councillor Duck, Councillor Duncan, and myself. So the motion is defeated. So it'll stay as 2026 Q4?
No, it stays as next term.
Next term, sorry. I think I've gone circular in my head. Yes, stays next term. Okay. Mr. Edwards, proceed.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Moving on to goal number 2, environmental stewardship.
Changing the completion date.
I think we need to change the completion date for this item to next term.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Got it moved and seconded. Moved by Councillor Duncan, seconded by Councillor Duck. Councillor Duncan?
I think the rationale is the same as for the first one.
Councillor Duck? Anyone else? Councillor O'Keefe?
Yeah, no, I guess what I'm just struggling with is next term. What I would prefer, can we not say like, I don't know, Q1 2027? And I don't know why council says we can't, because we can if we want to, based on what staff's recommendation is. I would think if staff think that this would come back to council in Q1 or Q2 of 2027, why can't we include that in there. And when the new council comes in and says, well, we don't like that, we want it to have it sooner or later, they can do that. But I think it at least sets some, lays something out for the new council and gives staff some idea of what the expectation is in terms of when this might come forward. So I don't understand why there's an issue.
Mr. Edwards?
So as I said earlier, staff will continue to work on all of these initiatives unless directed otherwise by council. And so ultimately, the new council will have a strategic planning session early in their new term to identify what their strategic priorities are. This may or may not continue to be one. But until such time, staff will continue to work on these initiatives. And if council wants to consider a date to include here, my recommendation would be Q4 2027, because realistically, the only way we're advancing this project substantively is with grant funding through those various grant programs. And then, you know, those take a fair bit of time to work through the application, the approval process, and then the procurement process to select a vendor to do the work. So I think a Q4 2027 is when it would be a date that I'd be comfortable putting if we were gonna put any date in here.
Okay, well, and that makes sense to me. I mean, if we think about the fact that we're gonna have a budget process soon, and we're going to make commitments for this strategic item, so it doesn't seem all that far-fetched to me that if we've made budgetary provision for it, that it could be included as a carry-forward item to the next strategic plan. It's just my thoughts.
Councillor Novak?
Thank you. Since this is a strategic plan and we typically would like to have completion dates, if staff is telling us that a realistic completion date for this item is Q4 2027, the motion on the floor simply says next term, am I correct?
Yes.
Then I'd like to propose an amendment that the completion date be amended to next term, Q4 2027.
Second.
Again, motivation, the whole point of having a strategic plan is to create a set of realistic, achievable goals that can be achieved within a fixed timeline. Otherwise, it's not a strategic plan. It's hopes and fears. And so I'd like to see a realistic completion date, because that also motivates staff to achieve that completion date. It gives them a target. And it makes more sense for us as well to be stating these types of objectives, which are realistic now that we've heard back from staff. So to me, that's the only reason for adding Q4 2027 is because it is a target date. Thank you.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you, Chair. I know it has been our practice that we just do whatever it's on the strategic plan for the rest of the term. The end comes, the new group starts with a fresh slate. However, I don't know, I think that's something that we might want to revisit. I think there's some value in leaving some carry-forward items, so when a new council goes into strategic planning, there's at least some carry-forward things that a previous council for the last 4 years have had discussions about it, done research, and thought these are good things to do. So they still have the opportunity to say, yeah, that's not a priority for us. And that's totally within their purview to do so. But I still think there's value in having it there for them to consider. So I'm in favor of the motion on the floor.
Looking for anyone else? Councillor Duff?
Yeah, I will not be supporting this motion as directed by staff. This doesn't change the work plan that the staff have, they'll continue working on these items because they do exist in the strategic plan. We can't predetermine next council's completion dates. Staff can only input their information as when they're ready to bring it forward.
Mr. Everett, sorry, Councillor Duff. Mr. Everett?
Just a point of order. I do believe that there's a motion on the floor that was seconded that was to change this completion date to next term.
Yes,
Mhm.
there is.
We're discussing the amendment.
I don't think has the amendment been moved and seconded?
Yes.
Oh, it has,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, it has. My apologies.
Moved by Councillor Novak, seconded by Councillor O'Keefe.
Right, so we're discussing the amendment, which is to put in Q4 2027. And as I've indicated, I think staff already indicated they're going to continue. This is part of the work plan. It is currently showing next term, which gives the purview of council the next term to determine the timing on it and how it fits within the strategic plan that they bring together. Doesn't take away from the fact the work isn't done. It's just gives the council the direction as to when they want to put it into play. Thank you.
Any first-time speakers? The mayor?
I'm not sure where I'm gonna go on this, because this is inconsistent with the with the motion on goal 1, number 3, where my last motion was that we have Q4 2026 next term. Council turned that down 6-1, and now we haven't moved to go back to that format under this item. I'll leave it that I'm confused.
I'm gonna rule that we've had more than enough discussion, so I'm gonna call the question on this particular motion, on the amendment. So I'll call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? We have Councillor Rintoul, Councillor Duncan, Mayor McNeil Smith, and myself opposed. Motion's defeated. So back to the main motion on the floor. Call the question. All those in favor? The main motion
Next
is
term.
just next term. All those in favor? Opposed? Sorry, I didn't catch, was that opposed or in favor? Councillor O'Keefe?
No, now that we're gonna do what we're
You're in favor? So, the motion carries unanimously. Mr. Edwards?
The next one?
Right, moving on to goal number 3, community.
Sorry, Mr. Edwards, pardon me, Mayor McNeil Smith?
Sorry.
I do wish to stay with goal 2, and I appreciate council's patience and consideration. I would like to move a revised motion that was under 8C regarding enhanced flood inundation modeling and mapping project. And the revised motion is that staff bring a report on establishing a flood construction level bylaw or revised FCL policy next term.
Second?
Motivator?
If I can motivate as briefly as I can, staff indicated that this policy began in 2017, and I think for good reason. There is climate change. Climate change is progressing rapider. It seems we're updated every year that it's progressing faster than the previous predictions. We can see the whitewater storm surges that are affecting our community. We had a pathway washed out on Lochside Park probably 8 years ago, and the cost was too prohibitive to replace it. We had a foot of water or thereabouts at first and second during a storm last year. These are going to get worse over time. Yes, the worst impacts are not forecasted for 50, 75, to 2050, 2075, or 2100. But we are building infrastructure, both private property infrastructure in terms of houses that would be anticipated to last between 40 and 60 years, and we'll be building municipal infrastructure. When we brought forward, last term, when the wharf proposal came forward, the FCL was taken into account, and it was going to be something in the area of 7 or 8 or 9 feet higher than the current wharf is. And that's what went forward to the public. We felt we were acting responsible based on the engineer's recommendation to to council on that particular initiative. There is a sawtooth effect that's been occurring over the last 5 or 6 years in our community in terms of properties, developments that do take into FCL, like the Rise, like the property, the condo property across from the ferry terminal, and there's others that are just a property two away that choose otherwise, and that's acceptable under current policy and professional standards. So I think if we wait 2 years, that is to Q4 2027, we're going to have a strategy. How long is it going to take to implement that strategy? So that's a concern. So this has been going on for 8 years. It would be another 2 years. That'll be 10 years. We required the data and the information that came forward at the last staff report, and I think we have reasonable grounds to act in the best interest of our community in the long term. To speak to the staff point, and I fully appreciate staff's recommendation that we not do this because of the natural mitigation and adaptation measures that may come forward, or that could come forward during the long-term mitigation and adaptation strategy. The reality is we had those come forward in some fashion with regards to the Roberts Bay initiative by an external organization. And quite frankly, with regards to private property, the current provincial, federal processes aren't conducive to doing that. And presently, there is no funding for these sorts of initiatives. They will be extremely expensive. And they're going to impact what we're going to do on the foreshore and in the marine environment is going to impact the FCLs in the Orchard neighborhood. Yes, there's potentially natural measures that could do that, but they're going to be extremely expensive, and we're not acting now. We're going to be looking for money after the strategy comes forward 2 years from now. So I think this is something we could move forward on. I would like to see a report come forward before the end of this term, but I would seek, my motion is next term, because in speaking with staff, given all the other priorities, it may or may not, and given what their recommendation was, it doesn't appear that's feasible. So I'll leave my motivation there.
Councillor Duck?
I'm going to follow up. Did you have a question to staff on? Okay. I will support this motion going forward, and I think staff have indicated that it would, in their development of this FCL policy, it would take into account environmental measures that staff spoke to earlier. So yes, I'd like to see this move forward too. Thank you.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. So just clarifying through you to staff, is this kind of what we talked about in our previous discussion tonight about the big plan versus little plan? And so this proposal then would just be focused on amending our policy, perhaps in areas where we've already identified with.
A point of order. I just think
Okay.
it's what the motion was is being misinterpreted. I
Okay.
indicated that staff bring forward a report on both potential flood construction level bylaw or changes to current FCL policy. So that's different. The original motion was just to bring a report on establishing a flood construction level bylaw. This has changed that it could include the option of changes to policy, which Mr. Newcomb spoke to during our previous discussion, just for clarification.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, that's fine then.
Seeing nothing else, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries unanimously. Anything else under this section? Okay, thank you, Mr. Evers. You can continue.
Thank you, Chair. So moving on to goal number 3, community infrastructure. Staff were making a recommendation for item number 2 to remove this priority item, which was review options for the provision of library services.
Councillor Duck?
I'd like to remove this item number 2, review options for provision of library services.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Novak. Wish to motivate?
I think we've heard all we need.
Councillor Novak?
Yeah, likewise, I think our library is providing great service, punches above its weight, and I don't see any reason to make changes.
Mayor McNeil Smith?
Thank you. I'll be in opposition to this. Staff have indicated in the report that there have been little or no concerns raised. I brought this forward during strat plan. It was supported by council before there were complaints raised by some members of the public. I felt that given it is now about 26 years since a referendum was held and a study was done in terms of service provided by one of the two providers, and I think it's prudent to review it on a periodic basis, whether it's every 25 years or sooner. I was advocating this for this a number of years ago, and I don't think we should be waiting for concerns to be raised about library service. I think it's prudent to review when there are when there is another significant option to do a review of services. North Saanich still has it in their OCP. All it takes is for us to send to pass a motion to send it to request that staff work together to determine the timing to bring back to councils.
Anybody else? I would just say I agree with much of what the mayor's saying, but I do recall that this item was removed from the budget last year, so I'm not sure if there's even any funding in the budget for this item, for an item such as this. If staff could comment.
I don't have those details available to me at this time, so.
I just conferred with the financial plan last year before the meeting, and it was voted, it was removed from the budget last year. So it would require funding put into the budget this year for anything to take place, so I'm not sure if that would alter your motion or. Councillor Duck?
Yeah, I appreciate the mayor's comments, and it's more about that, doesn't mean this won't come back into future strategic plans. It's just not viable as a priority within the staff's available time and budget. Thank you.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm in favor of the motion in terms of it being a strategic priority. As Colita says, maybe at some point in the future, but in the scheme of all the other many things that we have, I don't see this as a high priority item. I also think we're gonna have, sounds like we're gonna have some difficult decisions to made at budget time. This is something that is going to cost money, so I'm in favor of letting it go for now. Thank you.
Mayor?
Sorry, I did mean to clarify that it would be, the completion date would be next term. Or the initiation would be next term.
Thank you. Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Sorry.
For clarification, if we could have a motion.
Sure.
Right.
If you could read the motion back from our corporate officer.
The motion is to remove, under goal number 3, number 2, review options for library services.
So I'll ask that question again. All those in favor? Opposed? So we have 2 opposed, Councillor Duncan and Mayor McNeil Smith. Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to priority item number 3, advance options for increased multimodal connectivity across Highway 17. The recommendation is to amend the completion date to next term.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Would you like to motivate Mr. Councillor Duck?
Yeah, just again, it's dependent on Minister of Transportation, so I think the staff will keep it in their perspective and continue the communication with Minister of Transportation and look for the opportunity to make those changes.
Councillor Duncan?
Nothing further to add.
Mayor?
Thank you, Chair. I would propose that we split this into 2, and the reason is I think there's potential for confusion, and in fact I've discussed it with residents. There's an expectation from this motion that what we're pursuing is an overhead, a pedestrian overhead walkway, and we've clearly heard in the update from staff that there are really 2 parts to this. We do see surface improvements occurring for pedestrians and at the intersection in the near term. And so I suggest that we put that as a strategic priority and put whatever staff recommend as the completion date, whether it's Q2 or 3. And that separately, a motion is that we advocate for a pedestrian overpass and we simply say that. There isn't a completion date per se. We can say initiation now, and that can begin with a letter to the minister or ministers advocating, and we can discuss the timing on that at another time. So my recommendation is that we split it, and that the first motion be that
I'm just say point of order, wouldn't we remove this and then add 2 back in is where I see you're going? So then we can't really split this one because it's, yeah, what you're determining is 2 different items.
So would you like to have the
I would
motion voted on?
I would seek to amend
Yeah.
this into 2 separate recommendations, and the first of the 2 recommendations would be, and I would look to staff for wording, I'm just doing this on the fly, is that surface improvements, pedestrian and intersection surface improvements, I'm not sure how it's gonna come forward to council. Are we just, is the town just going to see the province do this, or is staff bringing something back?
I don't know that the province would require any provincial or council approvals for the work that they will be conducting, and I don't think it'll be conducted within this term. It's definitely a next term item. I don't see the island, the construction updates to the pedestrian islands occurring in 2026.
Would staff see it as appropriate that, given that it's not definite, that we do see it occurring, the province has indicated commitment, timing is one of the questions, is that we continue to advocate for increased surface and intersection improvements, surface improvements. I want to get the word surface in there because
Yeah.
it takes away the expectation.
Yeah, I think
just
the
doing that.
desire to amend the motion or amend the priority into 2 separate priorities makes sense. And so with one being something along the lines of continue to advance improved surface pedestrian or multimodal connectivity across Highway 17 as one, and the other being continue to advocate for a pedestrian and or multimodal overpass as another. And
Multimodal overpass, yeah.
for the first, for both, I would recommend that, that they would be a next term completion. Or sorry, for the first would be a next term completion. The other is effectively ongoing, but we would, I don't know that, how do you put a completion date to the second one, I think. But we can easily draft a letter for the mayor to sign to send to the minister in short order.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Thanks. I'm in support of this. The only one clarification I'm looking for, or perhaps adding in, is when we're talking about continued.
Sorry, we don't have a seconder yet.
Okay, I'll just ask a question then.
Can you second for discussion and then ask the
Oh,
question?
I'll second for discussion.
I've made an amendment.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll second the amendment.
Okay.
All
Go
right.
ahead, ask your
Okay.
question.
And so, when we talk about multimodal connectivity, I think the general public doesn't necessarily know what all that means. And when I talk to people, they're not only asking about the overpass, but what are you doing about that intersection, right, in terms of traffic as well? So my question to the mayor is your intention for the motion to include not only traffic improvements or just the sort of pedestrian and cycling connectivity? And so what I was hoping for is that if your first part of it would include traffic improvements for vehicles, and then also pedestrian and bike things, and then the second one would be for the overpass. But I wasn't sure what your intention was there.
I suggested some wording, and Mr. Edwards was helpful in some additional wording, and the intent was surface, multimodal, surface multimodal and intersection improvements.
So
If staff wanna read back what they have and if that meets
if that covers vehicular traffic, I guess is my question.
intersection improvements would cover vehicular traffic.
Okay. That's fine.
The improvements to the intersection are occurring.
Yeah.
We're in discussions right now with the ministry about, what that would look like and trying to consider the timing and sequencing of making those improvements in a coordinated fashion.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Councillor Novak?
I'm trying to understand if, as per Mr. Edwards, discussions are already underway, and I've been hearing about this for a number of years now. Is this even a realistic strategic goal for us as a community or as a council? The second one, I'm totally in favor of. We should advocate for that overpass as much as we can. But the first one's already seems to be in progress, or am I wrong about that?
It is in progress. It is advancing.
Then why do we even have that as a strategic goal option?
There are
Mayor?
other initiatives in the strategic plan that are advancing.
Okay, done? Okay, Councillor Duff, did you say anything? So I'll call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? This is on both, right? Okay. Opposed? Not opposed? Motion carries unanimously, and I guess we have to go back to the main motion then? Councillor Duff,
Just-
you have a question?
Point of information, I think we've already, the amendments change. Yeah, so we don't have a motion to vote on. Yeah, so I think we're done.
Well, it is on the floor, so we have to do something with it. Mr. Edwards?
Sorry, the original motion is still on the floor for the, I think it.
By passing the second one, we basically make the first one moot, is that what we're saying?
Sorry, point of
Yeah.
order, I'll turn to staff. When there's a motion on the floor and an amendment is moved, you approve the amendment and then you have to approve the main motion as
Yeah.
amended.
Yeah.
Even though it's
okay.
complete,
Yeah.
even though it's
Thank you.
completely understood what is
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's approving the main motion
Motion
as
as amended.
amended.
Exactly.
So we have to call that
Yeah.
question.
Calling the question now.
Yeah.
All those in favor? And those opposed? None opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you for that procedure clarification, Mayor McNeil Smith. All right, so moving on to what I believe is the last staff proposed change that we were discussing is priority number 4, DCC bylaw completion date amended to 2026 Q3.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Motivate? Either party? No? Anybody else? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Mr. Edwards?
And I don't have any more proposed changes from staff, and so I would like to open it up to see if
Mayor?
there's any further proposed changes.
You have the floor, Mayor.
Thank you. So number 1, facilities asset management, there is a slight change on how we're progressing. 1A was develop a concept plan and undertake community engagement. We are not taking concept plans during the community engagement. That'll be occurring. So I think if staff could amend the wording for the next meeting, rather than us wordsmithing it at this time.
That's right, and this is that's consistent with the direction from council. So
Okay, and I think completion might be Q2, April. This is part of Q2.
for the first part of the priority 1A, we feel confident that it'll be completed by Q2. I'm not sure about 1B, if that will be completed by Q2. I think we may want to leave that at Q3.
So I would move that.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed, motion carries unanimous. Councillor Duck?
Yeah, just to clarify or to complete, goal 5, 1B, have we established the new completion date? I believe it's coming forward in 2026 Q1.
Correct.
Just make that change, so.
Yes, yeah,
move that.
thank you for that, Counselor, yeah. 2026 Q1.
Second?
So moved, yeah.
Any motivation? Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Edwards?
I believe that covers all of the amendments that were being proposed at this point.
Okay, if there's nothing else, I think we're done that, so there's no other business, and we'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Duck, seconded by Councillor Novak. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed, motion carries unanimous. Thank you.
Switch.
So I would like to call to order a special council meeting on Monday, January 19th at 9:22 PM, and look for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Councillors Duck and Rintoul, or Councillors Duck and Novak, those in favor? Thank you, opposed, none opposed, carries. And I'll turn to Councillor Gurnett, who kindly reads our motions to go on camera.
I'll move this in the opinion of council that the public interest requires that persons other than members of the council and officers be excluded from the meeting to consider confidential matters regarding negotiations between the town and a First Nation pursuant to section 90.2B III of the Community Charter, and that council continue the meeting in closed session.
All in favor? Thank you, opposed, none opposed, that carries. We'll just pause a moment to go on camera.